All right, good evening, everyone. Calling to order the Common Council of the City of Gladstone, March 10, 2015. It is 7:40 p.m. If, Pete, can you call a roll?
I will. Councilor Nelson.
Here.
Councilor Mercero.
Here.
Councilor Johnson.
Here.
Councilor Sickman.
Here.
Councilor McMahon.
Here.
Councilor Reisner.
Here.
Mayor Jacob Ellis.
Here. You guys all join me for Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, good evening, everybody. I just want to apologize real quick. I think we first put the announcement out for a 6:30 start time, but we realized we had to change something in the charter to make us start at 6:30, so that's why we started at 7:30. But hopefully by next meeting we'll have it figured out and we can start at 6:30. But thanks for being here. I'm going to start off by saying let's take some business from the audience. We have some cards that are filled out already, so Jerry, you want to start?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Mayor and councilors, I brought some people here tonight that know the work we've done for the last 22 years at the River Resource Museum. I know you're trying to figure out what to do, and we certainly want you to do your duty, but we want you to know who we are and a few things about us. Senator Vern Duncan is going to present a couple letters from some legislators. Vern?
Thank you very much, Jerry. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, it's good to be with you this evening. And as you said, I am Vern Duncan. I'm a has-been, but I've been asked by our current legislators. They thought a former legislator could be here tonight instead of them because obviously they're in session and who knows what they're doing, maybe late tonight. Anyhow, I'm happy to be here and just to add my comments to this. I was involved with this program. In fact, I was in on the dedication of the program back in 1992, so I've watched it for many, many years. As an educator, I guess the thing that has most impressed me, of course, is the fact that about 1,000 young people have been involved in this program over the years, and the learning activities that they've had and the point that they've had to really become good citizens, I think, has been the highlight of what the program that I have seen and what I like. Other than the good that they do of cleanup and all of that, but the citizenship aspect of it has impressed me. I am here to represent former Senator and currently Representative Bill Kennemer, and he is saying to Mr. Mayor and to members of the council, it's my understanding that the City of Gladstone is considering terminating the lease you currently have with the Earth Crusaders on a site many of us have long called the water intake site on the Oregon City site of the Clackamas River, adjacent to the 990E Bridge and Clackamas Park. As you consider this action, I, as one well familiar with the site and the efforts of the Earth Crusaders, the Rivers of Life Center, and Jerry Herman, by the way, I think my work with Jerry Herman goes back to about 1974, so it's been a long time, would ask you to carefully consider the many positive impacts that this site and the efforts that have had on hundreds, if not thousands of people in Gladstone, the surrounding communities, and indeed Clackamas County and Oregon. In this regard, I understand that Mr. Herman has provided liability insurance across the 22 years, as well as carrying stewardship of the area. The nonprofit has generated and administered over 40 grants for youth and community beautification. They've established Oregon's first Youth in Tourism Corps, created numerous tourism and history awareness programs and activities, enhanced wildlife habitat, and protected our natural resources. Indeed, Earth Crusaders and Jerry have accomplished a great deal to protect, improve, and promote our community. Having represented Gladstone in the past as a state senator and as a Clackamas County Commissioner, I thank you for the opportunity to share my personal concerns and perspectives. I wish you well as you determine how best to proceed. Should you have questions, feel free to, I'll be happy to assist. Please contact me. Bill Kennemer, State Representative, District 39. Also, to the Mayor and the members of the Council, Brett Martin, Representative from District 40, says, I am writing to highlight the positive impact associated with the Rivers of Life Center and Earth Crusaders, particularly the Model Youth Involvement Programs. For over 20 years, these programs have connected hundreds of area youth with civic improvement projects throughout Gladstone, Oregon City, West Linn, and Milwaukee. Thousands of youth and community volunteers have worked out of the municipal pump station. Activities have included debris and litter removal from local rivers, educational tours for general public, and many other endeavors that connect the community with habitat enhancement opportunities. I hope that these vital programs continue to serve our area in years to come. Please do not hesitate to contact me if I have any assistance. Brent Martin, State Representative, District Number 40. And those are letters from our representatives. Have to present those, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Fine.
Thank you.
And I do, excuse me, I'm going to sneak right out. I have about 26 people at home. We're welcoming a brand new great-grandson.
Congratulations, Vern.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I'd like to introduce the Youth in Tourism Corps, the first in Oregon. These folks are trained, these young people, to be tour guides, hospitality, and interpreters on both buses and cruise vessels. And I'd like to have Damien stand for a second. Damien, he doesn't have to stand very much, does he? Okay, this is Jacob over here. This is Cody, and Juan is right there in the back. And then Jerry Miller is my assistant. There are about 10 of these youth that have been trained to be tour guides. So they also work out of the River Resource Museum doing landscaping. They were in your city doing work this weekend. Would Mr. Kent Ziegler come up for a moment? Kent and I have known each other forever. He's a developer, and he wanted to say a few things.
That way. Yeah, well, thank you, Jerry. Yes, my name is Kent Ziegler. I'm a resident here in Clackamas County. I'm presently president of the Oregon City Business Alliance, but I am here on behalf of my own relationship with Jerry Herman. I met Jerry back in the mid-'80s when I was doing projects over in Lake Oswego, and I was so impressed with his ability to connect not only with the local community, but with people that had issues and how we were able to resolve those issues. And I still feel today Jerry has that unique ability to go ahead and build bridges. His ability to look at a opportunity and fully capitalize it by engaging people is a unique talent. And I really feel that Jerry has persevered throughout the years since 1985 and exemplifies exactly what you look for in an individual that engages not only the youth that we have here today, but as many other citizens within their community. When he was leading Earth Day for, I don't know, how many years did you run Earth Day? 15 years. It's hard to find people that have that type of willingness to go ahead and surrender their time and their talents for a community. I've used Jerry not only in my own projects, but I've also used him in consultation on other developments and opportunities throughout the Clackamas County region. And I just ask each and every one of you, how would we replace this valuable resource that Jerry could bring to not only Gladstone, but the entire region? He's not only been an amazing steward of the land that he has to work with, but he's been an example to these youth on how to have respect, how to learn the ability to work with others in a positive environment. And those are people that we don't run across every day. Now, I'm going to put my hat back on as president of the Oregon City Business Alliance, and I'll say, if for whatever reason you choose that you want to terminate this lease, please, before you do that, contact me, and you have my contact information there, so that I can go ahead and engage the City Council and the Mayor of Oregon City, since this property is on the Oregon City of the Clackamas River, to go ahead and have Oregon City annex his site and continue all of his amazing endeavors and efforts to engage the community. But now would no longer be a issue or an item that you deal with, but we would go ahead in Oregon City and assume that control. As Vern Duncan said, he has maintained his liability insurance. He will continue to maintain his liability insurance, and I think he's a tremendous asset for the citizens of Gladstone. However, we do want to leave you options. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. We want you now to meet the folks here involved with allowing these youth to have employment opportunities for the future, which I never expected. I'm asking actually Dennis Corwin to come up, the general manager of the Portland Spirit. He's one of your Gladstone residents. And these young people you see here, over 90 or so people are hired per year by his company just to keep the program moving. And I just want to have Dennis say a few things for you real quick. Dennis?
Thanks, Jerry. Thank you for having us. Again, my name is Dennis Corwin. I'm the general manager of the Portland Spirit. I also am a Gladstone resident. My kids go to school here. It's where I call home. So I have a lot of vested interest in it. Jerry and I have worked together for years. We have done ecotourism out of his current location with passengers. And just this coming year, we have the great opportunity. We partnered to have a combined tour with one of our larger vessels coming all the way to the Oregon City area and get people off the boat onto motor coaches to really tour the surrounding area. And his youth program has been instrumental in making this work. We're mentoring and training them to be tour guides and work in the tour and hospitality industry. And ideally, if I can't employ them, which is my intention, we will get them out there to be employable by many, many other people. So, if you have any questions? No. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Your facility has a problem. It needs to be closed. We know that. I've known this for about a year when Pete and I started talking about this whole issue. John Borden's a civil engineer out of the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality and also the Water Resource Division. He participated, his divisions, in actually looking at this permit that established that facility. John has a couple things to share with you. I think a willingness to help you solve the closure issue. John?
Thank you, Jerry. My name is John Borden, and I'm a private consulting engineer. Live in West Lynn. And Jerry and I go back a long time. He was born 1 year before I was, and we grew up on the same street, and we've been in touch for, I hate to say it, 69 years now. In any event, I don't think I can add to the great things that Jerry has done other than to say that he has asked me to look at the Ranney collector. And I haven't done this in depth, but I was around when it was built. I was around when it became contaminated with leachate from the landfill. I was around when your water rights were transferred upstream, and you now get your water from another quasi-municipal entity. And now the question has become, does something need to be done, or is there a liability for that may prompt necessity to close that facility? I don't really answer all those questions, but I do know some of them and can comment on them, and I think rather than doing that, I'll just simply say I'm willing to help Jerry in this regard if these questions need to be addressed. I have a feeling that the answers to the closure issue, the liability issue, actually can be simple, as complex as they may seem. It could be as simple as taking the pumps out, filling the lateral lines that go out into the underground area, perhaps with concrete, and capping them off, and maybe even filling it as a last resort the column with some material, probably concrete. I suspect that that action, not very costly, could probably terminate your liability in these areas. I wouldn't be willing to stake my reputation on it at this moment, but my guess is it's probably that simple. If I can help you in any way in that regard, I'll try to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor and Council, we're almost done. Pastor Jerry Schmidt of the youth you see here and others have helped participate in work at New Hope. New Hope Church is a large church in this area and has also participated in a lot of the river tours in the past, and also some of the bus tours that these folks are trained to participate in. Jerry?
Thank you, Jerry, and Honorable Mayor and distinguished council members. Pleasure to be here with you tonight. My comments, brief as they may be, certainly are an embracement of Jerry and what he does. I think we have known Jerry personally for at least 20 years or so in relationship to New Hope Community Church, where I serve as executive pastor. I'm also a 42-year resident of Gladstone and enjoy being in this community. Raised our kids here, and they're great citizens today. Our experience with Jerry really has been through the youth programs that you've heard about here tonight. He has engaged some of the youth in doing the tours for us as a church. We've had some wonderful bus tours and river tours using the Portland Spirit Company as well. And it's been delightful to see the missional passion that he has for young people and to see them develop and become all that they can be and as he pours his life into them. The river tours, the bus tours, the youth programs all really signify the value that he places on young people today, and as a part of the property that he does that on and apart from that, certainly is worth giving it every consideration that you can in terms of the issue that's at hand. So glad to be here tonight with you.
Thank you.
And lastly, Mr. Mayor and Council, Rod Willett is our insurance agent. He's a corporate insurance person, and I want him to say a couple things to you. Rod is a Gladstone resident, and Rod has been very important in all of the nonprofit things I've done over the years. We've had never a claim. So, Rod?
Hello. I'm Rod Willett. I've been a resident for 25 years here in Gladstone. And as he said, basically I'm here to reassure you that there's been no liability claims with Earth Crusaders, and if you have any questions about limits or coverage, feel free to call me. We can always raise the limits and take care of any issues that you may feel Earth Crusaders may be liable for. And I'm always available. I believe Jerry had me send a letter last week which indicated that there have been no claims except for one tree that fell on his car. So I think that's it unless you have questions for me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council and Mayor. Well, that's the gist of our comments. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. We didn't want to take up any more time than necessary.
Thank you. Okay, any more business from the audience? Anything else? Okay, we're going to move on to the consent agenda at this time. There's 5 items on the agenda. Approval of January 27, 2015 adjourned meeting, January 30, 31st council retreat, February 10th minutes, approval of the project list, approval of application for a liquor license at High Rocks Pub, approval of the national campaign for Senior Center Meals on Wheels program, and the payment of February claims. So
I'd like to pull number 4, please.
okay, approval of national campaign of Senior Center Meals on Wheels program. We're pulling that from the consent.
Just a quick question. There was some emails back and forth with minutes, and we're approving the
minutes with the changes that were suggested.
All right. So,
I'll make a motion to approve items 1, 2, 3, and 5.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
All against? Okay, so everything on the consent agenda except for item number 4 has been approved. So now, item number 4.
I just had talked to Rhonda earlier today, and I just wanted to pull item number 4 so that she and some of her co-workers at the Senior Center had the opportunity to speak to us.
We want to thank you for the opportunity to come and visit with all of you tonight. My nutrition coordinator, Debbie Farron, caught this stuff that's taking your voice away. So I'm going to be Debbie and speak a little bit about what she had ready to share with you. This is my transportation coordinator, Shirley Scrivener, and my center assistant, Jamie. And I don't know if you all have been down to meet us, but we would like to just say hello and thank you for giving us some time. As Debbie has been a coordinator for the nutrition program for over 20 years, I know some of you are aware that we have 2 different programs for the meals at the Senior Center. We have a congregate lunch that serves 3 days a week, and then we have Meals on Wheels that is a 5-day-a-week program with frozen meals on weekends for some of the people that use our services. She wanted to share a little bit about, over the years, how our nutrition program has helped to develop socialization skills for some of the seniors that might be in their own home and not able to get out, and how it benefits them to eat a nutritious meal with us, and is a really important thing for keeping their mental stability and keeping people out of their house and isolated. And so she's seen over the years lots of experiences and positive things come out of our nutrition program. A lot of the seniors say that we're kind of a second home for them when they, they don't want to cook. Some of our gentlemen are on their own now and find a place to come in and have a good hot meal with us. Our homebound meal program is not only about serving hot meals. She says it might be the only person that someone sees all day long. We have some wonderful drivers. I've had a driver that is now driven for the meals program over 20 years, I believe. She actually drove for Oregon City when they served our meals program years ago, and came down here when we took over that program, and is still driving for us. She's also a neighbor of the center, and her mother used to participate in the senior center. And they just, I always get positive feedback from the people when I go do a home visit, that we have some fabulous meals drivers. They're caring, and they have a real concern of other people that they serve. And this is a valuable program to keep people in their home, and saves the government a lot of money if we place people under care in a home, in a situation where they're having to be placed in another situation to get care for. So I just would like to let Shirley say a few words about her transportation program. She brings people into our meals program, and then we're going to talk about the March for Meals program. So.
Hi, Shirley Scribner. I'm the transportation coordinator, and my primary job is to drive our bus, which is called the Tram. You may have seen us around town. And so some of our clients, so we talk about the Meals on Wheels program, come in for lunch 3 days a week, but then they get their homebound meals on the days they're not coming in. So that's how I'm relating to the March for Meals. So we, the days we don't serve lunch, they're getting homebound meals. And I know that for the people, it's very important to get a hot meal. For some people, that's the only hot meal they get the whole day. They might eat some cereal in the morning, or, but most of them aren't cooking. So anyway, it's just a very important program. So I will let Jamie talk.
I need to plug in anything.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jamie Southworth, and I am the Center Assistant over at the Gladstone Senior Center. And I just want to take a couple minutes and talk to you, give you guys some information about our March for Meals event that we have going on. Once again, we're participating in this national campaign put on by the Meals on Wheels Association, and it's to increase awareness of our local Meals on Wheels program. So not only are we trying to raise awareness of this program, but it also is a time for us to recruit volunteers. So as Rhonda mentioned, the volunteers really are a really vital part of the program. Without them, this program would not be able to run. We have wonderful volunteers who dedicate their time. Once a week, they come in, they drive their routes, they deliver the meals. Again, sometimes they're the only people that these people on the homebound meals route see. So they get a warm meal, and so we really rely a lot on these volunteers. So it's a time for us to try to recruit volunteers, let people know of our program, and it also gives us an opportunity to do some fundraising. And with the fundraising that we're going to be doing this month, March for Meals, so it is a national campaign, but all of the funds that we receive, they're kept local, so they're kept right here in Gladstone to help your neighbors and your friends. So I'm just going to take some time to present to you the different events that we have going on this month for the March for Meals. First is easy. We have change buckets. We have about a dozen of these or so around town at different businesses, Tebow's, Burgerville, Nana's Treasures, Baskin-Robbins, just a few to mention. So if you're out and about town and you see one of these change buckets, if you have some change down in the bottom of your pockets, please donate what you can. Otherwise, we have one at the Senior Center, so stop on by, come say hi. If you don't have change like me, you live in a world of debit cards, I have coordinated with U.S. Bank. You can stop in there, and any teller down there will take any donations. And another fun event that we're doing is our Burgerville Benefit Night. So I gave you guys all an invitation to that. This year it's going to be next Thursday, March 19th, from 5 to 8 p.m. And we partnered with them, so they're going to give us a percentage of their proceeds donated to the Meals on Wheels program. So we would like you all to come down and volunteer if you can, connect with the community and help support our program. And it's not only a fundraiser for donations, but it's also spreading the word. Last year I was out there to share my experience. I was out there with a sign in the drive-thru collecting donations, and I was really surprised on how many people didn't know about the Meals on Wheels program, or they didn't know that we had it here in Gladstone. So that was pretty amazing to me. And we did really well last year. It was a success, and we hope to do it again this year. It was lots of fun. So if you have an hour of time, come on down, come say hi. At least come get a burger and a milkshake. Everybody likes Burgerville milkshakes, right? And you don't have to stay in for dinner. You can do a drive-thru too. That works as well. And last but not least, I have sent invitation letters to you guys to personally drive a Meals on Wheels route. If you didn't get one, let me know. But we would love to have you actively hands-on participate in this event to kind of get a feel for what the program is really about and connect with the community and meet some wonderful people. So like I said, we have lots of options here to choose from to help us out, to help support the Meals on Wheels and the March for Meals campaign. So please tell your friends, your family, your neighbors, tell everyone about everything that we're doing with the March for Meals, and let's help spread the awareness of this wonderful program.
Thank you.
I think Rhonda's going to give a proclamation.
I'm going to beg you one more time. This has got a little history, and I know that you guys don't like to do proclamations, but I'm going to read. This came from the Meals on Wheels program. I'm sorry, but it's got a little history, and I think it's good for all of us to know. So it says here, in March 22nd, 1972, I don't know if you know this, but President Richard Nixon signed into law a measure that amended the Older Americans Act of 1965 and established the National Nutrition Program for seniors 60 years and older. Meals on Wheels established the National March for Meals campaign in 2002 to recognize the historic month, the importance of Older Americans Act nutrition program, both congregate and home delivered, and raise awareness of escalating problem of senior hunger in America. In 2015, observance of March for Meals campaign provides an opportunity to support the Meals on Wheels programs throughout the county and the state and the country of vital and critical services by donating, volunteering, and raising awareness for senior hunger and isolation. The Older Americans Act nutrition program, both congregate and home delivered in Gladstone, Oregon, serve our communities for more than 30 years. Volunteer drivers for Meals on Wheels programs in Gladstone are the backbone of the program, and they not only deliver nutritious meals to homebound seniors and individuals with disabilities, but also caring concern and attention to their welfare. Meals on Wheels programs in Oregon provide nutritious meals to seniors throughout the state to help them maintain health and independence, avoid unnecessary hospitalization, and premature institutionalization. Meals on Wheels programs provide a powerful socialization opportunity for the seniors in Gladstone to help them control loneliness and isolation. Whereas Meals on Wheels program in Oregon deserve recognition for the contributions they have made and will continue to make to local communities, our state, and our nation. Therefore, we, the City of Gladstone, Oregon, do hereby proclaim March 2015 as March for Meals Month. So, with that said, I just wanted to thank you for letting me share my information. I know we're a little long, but we don't come a lot, so thanks a lot, you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rhonda.
Thanks, guys.
Accept the report.
All right.
I planned on it.
Do we need to do anything with that? I think we still need to do number 4, don't we?
Yeah.
Okay.
I move that we approve item number 4, the Meals on Wheels.
Second.
Proclamation.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, moving on to correspondence. We had letters from 3 different things. I don't think we need to talk about them, I'm
Correct.
assuming. They're just letters. I had a question for Pete that I'd asked by email and didn't get an answer. Are you still working on that?
I have an answer for you. So you asked if the city had made a donation with regard to item number 8, I believe.
Had the city made a donation to the Seventh-day Adventist Church?
The city did not. The Fire Department Association, which they may have associated with the city.
So where did those funds originate?
Well, the fire department does the collection and the toy drive. The Fire Department Association, which is separate from the city fire department. So they do that on their own.
The city made a donation in there somewhere.
The city did make a donation to the toy drive, $500 to the toy drive.
Which I think we can easily say went to the over 100 families that they donated toys and food baskets to in the city, and then through all the other donations, cash and toys that they received through the citizens here, and also through a couple of the events. We do the fire department does an event up at Kmart last year, of course, because it closed, but we also did one at Target, so that's where we get a lot of our toys and cash donations as well. So you could say it's probably commingled somewhat, but I would contend that $500 stayed in the city for the residents here, and then that the donations that the department received went up to the food bank at the Seventh-day Adventist camp.
I just think we need to be careful about, church and state issues and keeping them separate, so maybe it's something we can discuss at greater length in a future meeting. Thanks. All right, moving down to regular agenda, item number 9, ordinance number 1455. This is the ordinance amending Chapter 2.04 of the Gladstone Municipal Code to change the meeting time for city council meetings, which we didn't do tonight. Pete?
8.1. Okay, so because our resident expert is not here this evening, the first step is to read it by title. So I will read that, and then we'll have request a motion for approval of the first reading. So ordinance number 1455, an ordinance amending Chapter 2.04 of the Gladstone Municipal Code to change the meeting time for city council meetings.
Okay, I'm looking for a motion.
I make a motion that we approve ordinance amending Chapter 2.04.
Approve the first reading.
The first reading.
I'll second that.
I've got a question, if I may.
Sure.
Do we really need to have an ordinance saying when we meet?
It's in city code currently.
So
the city code right now, currently, the charter mandates that you have one meeting a month.
Right.
And that's all it mandates. It doesn't say when, where, length. The city code currently says it shall be on the second Tuesday at 7:30 at City Hall.
Yeah.
So to the degree that you want to change it, we're going to have to change code in some fashion. Either you can remove that completely and not have anything in code, which I wouldn't recommend personally. And most cities have it in their code somewhere. Or, as we're doing here, we're amending the code.
Okay.
Okay, we got a motion.
Okay, so we had a motion to approve the first reading. We had a second. Pete, do you want to do a voice vote?
Sure. Councilor Nelson.
Yes.
Councilor Mercero.
Yes.
Councilor Johnson.
Yes.
Councilor Sickman.
Yes.
Councilor McMahon.
Yes.
Councilor Reisner.
Yes.
Mayor Jacob Ellis.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, someone needs to make a motion to change Section 3 if you want this to take effect immediately, which I believe that the council does. currently Section 3, this is not listed as an emergency ordinance, and so therefore it would take effect in 30 days, and my understanding is council would prefer to have this start within 2 weeks at the next meeting, in which case someone needs to move that Section 3, that sentence is removed, and I have some language that I would proffer for you. Council finds that an emergency exists, and therefore this ordinance takes effect immediately, and that is required by charter if you're going to have it take effect immediately.
Neil, do you want to go?
I'll make that motion.
Well,
that we
substitute Section 3.
Section 3 for what you just said.
Second. Okay, Pete, can you give us a voice vote again? Do we
little
need to vote?
discussion first, maybe?
One other thing, go ahead.
I believe that's appropriate, right? Discussion after the
First reading.
Yeah. There was a couple of questions about adjourn meetings. Is that just a terminology that we are using, or is there something in our code?
I looked into that for you, Counselor. The word adjourn is not found in the charter or the city code. You do find the word adjourned meetings in state statute for corporations that are meeting that have an annual meeting. Sometimes if you have an annual meeting and you can't get it all done in one day, it's going on too long, you have what's called an adjourned meeting, which just basically says, let's come back and finish what we started today. That's different than a separate meeting, and council has been moving towards having two separate, distinct meetings on different agenda items. So the terminology adjourned, I know Gladstone has used that for many years. It's not really the proper term, but it's just historically used.
Okay, so there's nothing we would need to do with any of this. And as far as the amendment, I know we would really like to move forward and start with this next month, but I just don't know that I want to consider this of the importance of an emergency. I mean, when you declare an emergency to make something happen, I just don't know if this rises to that level, and I think maybe just let it go its 30 days and we'll start next month.
Well, that's my line.
Well, I offered you to go first, and you told me to go
Well, I
ahead.
thought you wanted me to make the motion.
All right, fine. Let's just move on. That's it. No amendment to the third.
So you've made a motion and a second, and you've had discussion.
I have another question.
If you're going to kill the emergency amendment, you need to take the vote that it just vote no if that's what you want.
Okay. My question or comment is on paragraph 1, where you struck out of the city should and added will.
I think it's just extra verbiage. That was a grammatical change.
But will means that every Tuesday, the second Tuesday of every month at 6:30, we're going to be here. So if Monday night we have an earthquake and this place I think we should leave it as shall or should. What? Okay, we're not getting out of here by 8:15, sorry. So, it's just my thought. So, should I withdraw my motion?
Is your motion was your motion the emergency motion? Well, once it's been seconded, you really
I
need to...
disagree with the emergency comment. Did people come tonight thinking it was going at 6:30?
Yes.
Okay, why is that?
Because we advertised it last month.
Okay, so we didn't commute well. And
right.
Based on that, I think we can call it an emergency and we should just make it happen.
Well, I guess we'll just, he made the motion to do the emergency meeting. We can vote on it. If it passes, fine. If not, then we just move on 30 days from now. Okay, so call the roll.
Yes.
Pete?
Councilor Nelson.
Yes.
Councilor Mercero.
Yes.
Councilor Johnson.
Yes.
Councilor Sickman.
No.
Councilor McMahon.
No.
Councilor Reisner.
Yes.
Mayor G. Cabellas.
Yes.
Passes.
Do you have to have
And then you need to have a second reading, the way Gladstone Charter...
Right.
So you've done your first reading, it's been approved, it was unanimously approved. If there's a motion for a second reading by title, to approve a second reading.
Ordinance number 1455, an ordinance amending Chapter 2.04 of the Gladstone Municipal Code to change the meeting time for city council meetings.
Okay, you need a motion for the second?
I make a motion that we approve the second reading
And I'll second that.
Pete, can you give us a roll call vote, please?
Counselor Nelson?
Yes.
Counselor Mercero?
Yes.
Counselor Johnson?
Yes.
Counselor Sickman?
Yes.
Counselor McMahon?
Yes.
Counselor Reisner?
Yes.
Mayor Jacobellis?
Yes. Okay, moving on to number 10, item number 10, Transportation System Plan / Street Master Plan - Sewer Master Plan.
All right, Mr. Mayor and City Council, at the last meeting, City Council asked for some additional research by the City Attorney's Office. I believe City Attorney Abma has that for you, so we'll start with that.
So City Attorney Dufin, who's the public contracting expert, provided this memo, and I believe everyone in the City Council has a copy of it. But essentially, in 2011, the law changed, and for certain professional services of certain professions, such as architects, engineers, the legislature requires cities to go through what's called qualification-based selection, meaning that you first determine who's qualified to do the work, and only then can you discuss pricing. And that's if it's up to, if it's more than $100,000. So you had asked Councilor Sickman at the last meeting, and I believe the City Attorney Dufin talked to you about it, but that's the reason why it was a two-part process.
Right.
And I don't know if you have any further questions, and you do have the memo, right? Is that...
Yes.
We do.
Okay.
Yeah. I looked up the House Bill 3316, okay? I read that entire thing, and either I missed something. I never found the comment regarding the no, there was a comment regarding $100,000 to $250,000.
That's in the attachment for that the lobbyist group provided as the attachment.
But I never saw it on the House bill. I was just curious where that number
and it could be, Counselor, that it was already in the statute, and that the House bill that you read wasn't amending that section, that it already existed. I'd have to look at it without having that
so
House
the one
bill.
was appealed, and that could have been in that one.
It could have been. It was that language was already in the statute, and what they were doing didn't affect that portion of the statute that already existed.
Okay. Thank you.
So for capital projects, is this as well? So when the library comes up, is this the same process for the library, or is that a different process because we're building something versus getting...
Correct. This is for professional services, so it lists very specific ones: engineers, architects, land surveyors, and then they added photogrammetrists, which I believe are when they take the photos, aerial photos, and then do mapping from that. So it's specific. It's limited to just certain personal services contracts. So it really would depend, Councilor McMahon, on who you're hiring, if it's personal services versus building.
Even though the services for the library will probably be over that amount?
You're going to have, you're going to be over 100,000. So clearly, you're going to have, if you're hiring the architect to design versus the contractor to build. So they're different. This is the personal services contract.
Okay.
So
it's kind of the beginning part where you're doing the surveying, the engineering sort of thing.
if we've previously hired somebody by this process, and we've used them, we've negotiated with them on another project, do we have to go back through it again, or can we use that directly, that professional services provider directly, or?
There's an exception for dollar amounts, as we said, 100,000, and if you've hired a consultant who's previously performed work. So I don't know if you're talking about you've hired a prior consultant who's for the city.
Well, we had a consultant who did the water and stormwater master plans. Are they already pre-approved, or would they have to go back through this process again?
If the project that you're doing is different, if it was the same sort of project, the same concept, they may not have to. But if you're talking about a different kind of project, the fact that you've already used the firm once doesn't mean you get to use that firm again, because it really is the qualification to perform the particular work request. So it kind of depends on what your work request is. It could be a similar kind of work request, in which case you wouldn't have to.
No, I mean, water and stormwater would seem to me to be similar to sanitary sewer.
It is very similar in the way of the mapping, and I can look into that for you if you want to use that same...
It may just be a technicality,
yeah.
But...
that one's a close call because it's very similar.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'm happy to look into it for you if you'd like, Counselor.
On page 10-7, paragraph 3, we asking for 4 or 7 paper originals?
We're asking for 7 paper originals and 4 CD, DVD copies.
Okay. Because it says include 4 and then there's a 7 in parentheses, paper originals.
Yeah, that should be 7.
Okay.
So thank you for pointing that out.
And then, do we have, when this is executed, we're asking these professionals to provide us updates, progress reports. Here, the billings progress report should be submitted monthly for services provided for the previous month. Do we have somebody on staff that can read and know that what they say that they're doing, they're really doing?
Well, in the past, the progress reports have gone to the Public Works Director. From time to time, I've been included on that, but as you know, we don't have an engineer on staff. So to the extent we're involved with the processing of the master plans and the development of those, we do have some knowledge about what's going on and what's happening. But if you're asking if someone who has engineering knowledge is reviewing this, no, we have not. We could contract that out if council wishes.
Well, that's all I... Thank you.
Okay, so...
One of the last, are we going to be seeing the contract then after we get a person...
Yes, so once we go through the scoring process and select the consultant, then a contract will be negotiated, brought back to City Council, and City Council will either approve or reject that contract or modify it.
Okay, thank you.
I may have got confused on this one. What page did you mention, Neil, that you had a problem with?
Well, just, I believe there was a typo on 10-7, paragraph 3.
Okay, then I got to ask a question about 10.10. On that, it seems as though the proposal is already due.
Well, the dates do need to be modified. If you remember, it was advertised once, and we did not have much luck. So those dates do need to be modified for the new solicitation.
Okay, because we were scheduled to approve it tonight.
Well, what I need from City Council is to authorize me to re-advertise. I do need to modify those dates to meet the new timelines, though.
Now, I believe with the communications with the city attorney, one of these qualifies, it doesn't qualify as a QBS project.
City Attorney Doofman said that for the second one, the transportation one, it doesn't, you do not have to go through qualified or qualification-based selection if you don't want to, because it doesn't involve the National Environmental Policy Act.
Right. So I'm working on alternate language to add to that solicitation so we can take into account, accept and take into account bids for the project.
Okay.
I have a question on, the dates are wrong on this. Now, do you want us to approve you re-advertising tonight, or do we wait another month?
Well, I'd request some latitude in placing the dates on the solicitations, but I would like to get this going as soon as possible.
Okay, I'll make
so I believe we can have the dates changed and the advertisement going out either by the end of this next week or by Monday.
Okay, these are both on the same agenda item. Are you proposing that you make the changes in language on the second one as well, and we just approve that with your changes?
Yes.
Okay.
Are they still completion dates will change also, or are you still shooting for them?
I'm still shooting for these dates, but I think we may have to have some discussion with whoever the consultant is to make sure they're able to do that. And as council remembers, you've requested that future contracts have liquidated damages included in those contracts, so they are going to be sensitive to that end date. So We'll come back to you on that.
Okay, so
Go ahead.
we're gonna make a motion to...
So I make a motion
move
that
forward.
we re-advertise.
Got a second on that?
Second.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All against? Or opposed? All right, so Pete, that's done. Moving to item number 11, the police station seismic upgrade grant.
Right. So, Mr. Mayor and City Council, as you know, we were awarded a $360,000 grant to seismically upgrade the police department. The issue we have, as you all know, is that we're contemplating a new facility, and this grant can only be used for the current structure. We've had some correspondence back and forth with the staff at the granting agency, and the original plan the city has is to prepare a ballot measure, still subject to council approval to do that, but have it hit the ballot in November of this year. Staff at the granting agency is telling us that if we do not expend grant funds by that time, we can opt out of the grant without a penalty. If at that time we decide to move forward, we expend the funds on seismically upgrading the current facility, they do expect us to be using that facility for police services for a 10-year period. What I'm recommending City Council does right now is to accept the grant, go ahead and sign the contract with the granting agency, and have us revisit this after the November election. Or if City Council chooses before that not to move forward with the ballot measure, revisit at that time. There may be, there is some preliminary work we'll need to do before that November date to make sure we can complete the project if we move forward within the time period. We're required to complete the project within 24 months of signing the agreement. We will have to advertise for some professional services and go through a bidding process, like we previously discussed, prior to that November date. The costs to the city are pretty limited. It's staff time and the cost of advertising and some legal review. But I suggest we go ahead and do that. We can have those solicitations out there and decide after the election whether or not to enter into contracts with these consultants or just not accept the proposals at that time.
How much will it cost up through November?
Not much. We're talking several hours of staff time, maybe 1 to 2 hours of legal review, if that, and the cost of the advertisements in whatever media we choose.
Okay, but less than $1,000, or?
I think so. Yeah.
But we don't have to, I mean, timeline-wise, I mean, we would incur that about September-ish? I mean, we don't have to do that next month or July or whatever?
I would think we'd go out for we'd start advertising in September.
All right, so September, we don't have to worry about any money being spent?
Right.
All right.
So, how much is the police station worth?
Well, we had an appraisal of the two buildings combined. Technically, they're one building, City Hall and the police station. I can't give you the exact number, but it was in the $300,000 range.
About $350,000 for the whole thing?
Right.
Okay.
But as is.
As is.
Yeah.
And we're talking about spending about $700 and something thousand.
Well, it could be because there would be a city component with that.
Right.
Right. And that's why we're talking about a new facility also.
Right.
Right.
So, I mean, I can't see spending a penny of our money on a building that's really old, that needs to be replaced, be it our tax money or the state's tax money, when we're going to replace it sooner than, or if we go with this, let's say the bond, or the voters, we're not going for a bond, I'm sorry, wrong word. If we go and ask permission to build something new and it gets turned down, I still don't see spending money on that building is a good use of public money. We still need to replace it. And we have to keep it for 10 years if they do, you know, if we were to go that route. So I can't support this.
The one nice thing about it, it does give us a second option if the voters wouldn't pass something in November. And even if the voters didn't pass something in November, we still could make the decision not to spend the money at the time. But it makes sense to me to take advantage of this at this time and in November make the decision of whether we're actually going to spend the money or not.
I support what Kim says, along with, I believe the way the grant is written is for this building, no other building. However, I wouldn't be surprised with some discussion that if we end up choosing another alternative, you know, like some buildings that we've discussed possibly purchasing, we might be able to use it at that site possibly too. So if that costs me, that's why I asked the question. I agree with Neil wholeheartedly. By golly, we need this building needs to come down. But if it's $1,000 is compared to losing $360,000, that's a pretty small percentage. So.
Any more discussion? Anybody got anything? Steve? Matt? Okay.
Nope.
All right, so basically now we're going to take a vote, or I need a motion to see if we're going to accept the seismic, the police station seismic upgrade grant.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve it.
And I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
All right, moving on to...
We need to do a roll call.
Oh, now we need to do a roll call?
Yeah, because
Okay, Pete, can you do a roll call?
Councilor Nelson? Yes. Councilor Mercero?
Yes.
Councilor Johnson?
Yes.
Councilor Sickman?
Yes.
Councilor McMahon?
Yes.
Councilor Reisner?
no.
Mayor Jacobellis?
Yes. We need to do anything else?
Get your gavel.
Okay.
Motion passes.
The motion passes.
There you go.
I didn't do it on the last one. You missed on the
Sorry,
last
I was
one.
sleeping.
We'll get him
Oh.
trained yet.
Is he here to help?
The slow learner.
Trying.
All right, item number 12, approval of the Gladstone Public Libraries Policy Manual.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, Library Director Green will make this presentation.
Thank you for the council. I have Katie Lewis because she wanted to address one of the issues that council has recommended, some changes to the policy manual. The biggest change, you have the policy in front of you, the biggest change is probably the behavior policy. Originally I included, you put in an ordinance, and it was suggested by the city attorney that we actually change it to include it into like a behavior policy because it's easier to change. I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
That's the exact reason why. You could do it by ordinance, but then every time you want to tinker with that and change a particular behavior, you're going to have to go back to council and change it with a vote. So policies, you can do it by policy. Many libraries do. I think that's the more convenient for the council, but it's your option.
These are the recommended changes that I have. It's easier that way if it's voted on, it can be clear. Okay.
Thank you.
They really stuck their hand. Thank you. Thank you.
I spoke to several councilmen, Councilman Hickman, Councilman Johnson, and I think Councilman Reisner all had some input into this. And this is by Katie Lewis is here actually. And the first change was actually on the council packet 12.2 where it says 3.2.3 powers and duties. And this represents duties of the library board. In the policy manual, what I had did is I had pretty much put in word for word of what the library's bylaws were. And it has been recommended by several of the councilmen to remove the fifth line from the policy manual that says, recommend to City Council prospective board members based upon review of a standard application form and possible personal interview as board vacancies occur. Some of the councilmen would like to have this removed to make it consistent with some of the other committees that are in here with the city. We did have some concerns from the library board, and that's why Katie is here if you wanted to voice your concerns with the Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie Lewis, a longtime resident here in Gladstone, and I'm also the treasurer of the library board. And yes, I did find some concern for removing that because we have been in a state of flux on the library board. We've had a number of applicants come through, and we have had to interview our applicants. Either they didn't show up for the interview, so therefore their applications were removed, or they had, we act as a kind of as a screener, because of course we only would like to have people who have the best interest of our city and the patrons of the library to be able to help make recommendations and look over policy and procedures. And therefore we always ask any applicant who comes in if they believe in banning books. That is the number one thing we always ask. And it's very important that we ask this because we do not want to open the library board to people who want to come in and have a private, personal agenda, because that's really not what the library board is about. The library board is about the community and about the patrons of the library, and so we just really oversee and ensure that it is fair for our community. And we just felt that if that's removed from the library board and turned over to the council, the members who fill out these applications are probably very good people, but if they don't bother to show up and be interviewed, how do we know that they're going to come to the meetings and be an active participant in our library board meetings? If you miss 3 meetings, you're out. So that's why it's very important that we screen our members and make sure that we have correct, people who are representing the library board. And that was one of the reasons why I felt very strongly that we should be allowed to continue to have applicants that we screen. I think it was very fair. We screened every applicant this last time, and we brought those to the City Council, and we asked you to look them over and choose one of the applicants to come on our board. And I thought it was a very fair application of our jurisdiction as library board directors. And I felt that, did we do something wrong, or did you feel that we had overstepped boundaries? But I thought that that was very fair for us to go ahead and do the selection process. You had every applicant who came. Every applicant that we had interviewed, we brought you their names, and you made the decision. And we feel that was a very fair process for us. Do you have any questions?
So what's the difference between the library board and the Public Library Foundation? Is that two separate entities?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The Library Foundation is a separate entity. It's not directly affiliated with the city. They do work to support our library, but they are a standalone entity.
Okay.
Ms. Lewis, I will have you know that I'm probably one of the people that brought this up. And one of my reasons for thinking this is consistency throughout our city. I believe the library board does a very good job. I believe that I can see merit in it. One of the other boards and commissions we have is the Planning Commission. They actually have quasi-judicial authority, which means they are a judge and a jury over law. We do not even take recommendations and formal interviews when we're looking at those people. I would say the Planning Commission is probably the second highest commission in the city, and we're not doing it there. I really don't have an issue from having a recommendation. I think all of our boards, I think it would be wonderful if they made recommendations. But as far as policy, I think we need to be consistent. If the council chose to require all of our boards and commissions to do interviews and screen the people and make a recommendation to city council, I don't know that I would oppose that. But my thing here is to be consistent, and I believe there are at least one board or commission that has legal jurisdiction. And if any of them were to do that, I would think that one would be one of them that we would want to do that. So that's kind of my reasoning. It has nothing to do with the library board has done anything wrong. It's just as we move forward with new policies and procedures, they need to be consistent, or there needs to be a really good reason why they are inconsistent. So that's kind of where it came from.
In all due respect, I do see your side of the story. However, perhaps it might be in the best interest of the other boards to maybe take in consideration that they should be screening their applicants as well and making those recommendations. And perhaps when you start removing bylaws and changing bylaws, which is in our bylaws, it has been voted by the City Council, it has been enacted, and we have upheld it very faithfully. But we start systematically removing those bylaws and changing them to suit your needs, then what happens to the rest of the bylaws? You just throw them out the door? I mean, this is where we have to stand our ground and say, well, if you want to make change, perhaps look at the other committees and boards and make recommendations that they also screen their applicants too and have a voice. It's a way for them to have a voice as well.
So what other bylaws are you talking about?
It's written in our bylaws that we...
In here, or is it something else that I'm not...
In the bylaws of the City of Gladstone, I don't have a copy. Did you we not have any more copies?
It's
the library. I just have the one copy. I'd be happy to share it with you if you would like to take a look at it. The bylaws of Gladstone, the public library, listed under Article 2.
Okay.
And so since it's written there, we would hate to have to remove that.
Yeah, bylaws.
Well, I think our goal was to pass this tonight because it's been going on for some time. If there's a need to have more discussion, maybe at the Library Advisory Board and maybe with council, and look at this more deeply, that might be the right answer at this point, because I was eager to get this passed. I know this has been something that's been percolating for a long time, so perhaps we need to have more discussion about it.
Thank you, and I would appreciate that, because this kind of took us by surprise, and I'm sure that if our library board had been more aware of it, we would have had our president and our secretary and our other members come, and we could be here and show our solidarity on upholding our bylaws.
Bring the tar and feathers, I'll show up.
You betcha.
Thank you. I didn't realize...
I'd just like to make a comment about the advisory board. Sometimes at the senior center, we get applicants, and I have no idea who they are. They're not involved in the senior center, and I kind of wonder why they're even applying to my board. So I think it would be a good process that I would be able to go through my applications and see who's applying to my board, because I don't even know. They come straight to City Hall, and it's like I'm surprised when I get an application. So I'd like to see my board possibly looking at applicants also, at least letting me see who's applying to my board. So I'd just like to say that.
And if I could interject, because this issue has come up prior, and we've worked on this. Under the city code, city council appoints the board members to the library. That's clear. It sounds to me like the question is just whether the library board can also recommend the ones that it thought were the most qualified based on the application. But I mean, I want to be clear that council has ultimate authority over appointments to the board. This seems to be more just of a recommendation, and I'm not taking a position on whether this line should be in or out. I understand Councilor Sickman's consistency argument, but just want to be clear on who appoints this board.
Right.
Well, I think it raised, I mean, just so you know, and it really does need to be talked about it across the board, because the argument against is that, well, you screen them, so you find people that are of like mind, and then we get those recommendations, so we really don't have a real good look, and the argument from some of the citizens that we just keep packing the boards with the same people because that's who gets recommended. So you can see that side of it. So, just so you know.
The council does get the entire packet of all the applicants, and then they just recommend, who from that pack that they would recommend. But council does have the ultimate decision.
Maybe I misunderstood. I thought there was some that were removed because they didn't show up.
Only if they didn't show up. If they don't show up to have an interview, a formal interview with the library board, then they're obviously not interested, and that's how we understand that. If you don't bother showing up at your time,
so we don't see all the applicants.
Only the ones that do not show up are the ones that do not. I believe those are the ones that do not.
I believe the last few times we have provided all the applications to council, whether a person shows up or not, because council is making the determination. It's my position that you should see all the applications.
Okay.
It could be noted that, one of the applicants didn't show up for the interview, but you still should see all the applications.
Okay, so the other changes, did you guys, do we just want to talk about those?
Right, okay. The next change would have been 12.35, and that was on the behavior policy, and actually Councilman Johnson picked that up. It was actually a typo that age of 8 should have been changed to age 10 with those. So both times it was talked about leaving one or more children under the age of 10 at your rate, or vulnerable adults who recently appear to be unsupervised or unattended anywhere on the library premises. Children under the age of 10 must be with an adult at all times, and that's the recommended change, so it's consistent throughout the policy manual. The other change, the third change was on page 12-44, and this was suggested by Councilman Siegman, is currently we have the library recognizes the following holidays, and at the past, I think it was December council meeting, they talked about when City Hall was deciding to close, who was closing early, depending on staffing that day, that there was some conversation about that. And by putting this wording in, it would allow some leeway in the future should council decide to adjust any of the hours. So the current wording was the library recognizes the following holidays, and new wording would read the library will be closed the following days and such others as proclaimed by the Gladstone City Council. The fourth issue, did you have any questions on that one? Okay. And the fourth one was actually, I just had put, Councilman Siegman asked about why the standards for Oregon Public Libraries were included in it, and it was just really included for your reference. It was not for the council to vote on. So those are pretty much the changes. Am I understanding then we can't vote on it because of the change of number 1?
I have a question. Anybody has it? If I remember right, when we had the auditors here last month, they mentioned that they didn't audit the library board's books. Is that correct?
They obtained the bank statements, but they didn't give it a full audit.
Okay. So, and according to this, that it will be audited in the future then? Under 3.2.2? I feel that it should be, and if there's public funds. Says the book shall be audited annually by an independent auditor. That's the second sentence, second paragraph.
Right. Where are you at, Neil?
On page 12, 3.2.2 officers, second paragraph, second sentence.
That was in their bylaws with that.
So is it in the bylaws also?
I believe, Katie.
So maybe that's a separate question I'll have to ask later.
Right. And just a real quick question, Irene, is when we're talking about exclusions, do you guys actually have a written exclusion form?
No, we do not have any of that. This is a policy. We're working on the procedures after this.
And then have you guys talked to the PD how it's all going to manifest itself if they get a call?
We have not yet.
Okay.
No.
So those two things kind of you're working on?
Yes,
okay.
The procedures will come after the policy gets
okay.
approved.
Sorry, the book shall be audited annually.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so we got a couple options. Go ahead there.
So there hasn't been a motion. Am I understanding that you're tabling this, or are we moving forward and...
I'd like to make a motion, but...
Okay, so you withdrew the first...
No.
Okay, go ahead and tell me what you want to do.
You can move, well, your options are to move and accept it as the policy is currently written, no changes, or to move to accept the policy with whatever smorgasbord of these changes you want. It sounds to me like at least 2, 3, and 4 are not controversial, so it's the only one, I guess, is the question whether you're going to keep one in there or not. At least that's what the way I was feeling the way this was going.
I think this should go through the library board once more before it comes to council in its entirety.
Well, I think this is a policy decision that we're making to make this match the rest of our boards.
I understand.
And that's kind of our duty, is to make policies, and...
One more month won't hurt at this point, and there's obviously
some... We've been working on this for a long time.
I'd like to get it adopted, and I mean, we can choose to adopt it as this document is written. We can choose to adopt it, like was said, 2, 3, and 4 are basically accepted by everybody, I think. So it's just a matter of a question. I could make a motion and call for a vote of whether we include number 1 in the edits or not. If that's what the council would like, and once that decision is made, we could go on to the rest of the decision.
Can I ask a question? What is your preference, Irene?
I was hoping that you could maybe at least adopt everything except for Section 3, which would be of the policy. So you would adopt everything of the policy except for Section 3, library structure and organization. And then that could just be looked over as a whole and inserted later, because that doesn't affect our daily operations. We're finding out that we really need this. We used this just a few weeks ago, and we were visited by the detectives for the murder case. We used it for behaviors with some kids recently that were acting up in the library, and we're like, we need this. And some staff is really looking for something.
If the policy was accepted as is tonight, how much of a difficulty, if we changed our policy regarding this one thing, would be to change?
Just put it on the agenda and vote on that one specific 3.23.
It's like a withdrawal of everything.
And then that'll give us time to look at the other boards and see if we want to bring them up to this standard or bring that down to their standards. All right? Make sense? So I need a motion to adopt this whole kit and caboodle with the exception. No, just leave it as is. We'd take number 1 out of it. Right? To not removing number 1.
Make a motion. We are or we are not removing number 1.
Can I suggest that for now, we at least vote on 2, 3, and 4? Does someone make a motion that 2, 3, and 4 are acceptable changes, and then we'll address 1 in a second?
I make a motion that we approve approval of the Gladstone Public Library's policy manual with the edits of number 2, number 3, and number 4 of the document that the library director handed out tonight.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so now we got to have a discussion about number 1. Sean?
Or just do a vote.
What's that?
Let's go to a vote.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think you're at a point where you might want to vote, and then if the vote is negative, you can send it back to the library board.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt number 1 to the Gladstone Library Policy Manual.
Second. All in favor?
By adopt 1, you mean as removing...
Adopting edit number 1 off of the document that Director Green handed out this evening.
Okay.
Oh.
So that's saying removing.
That is
line.
removing.
Okay, so you better clarify that. So let's go back to 1. We're adopting this, we're removing the 5th line, which is the recommendation of the prospective board members. So.
Correct.
Do we have a second on that motion?
Before we vote, what are we doing again?
We are voting to see if we are actually going to remove line number 5, which is the recommendation to the city council of prospective board members. If we all say aye, then that line's going to be removed.
Okay.
All right? Everybody got it? So we got a motion, we got a second, so now
Discussion, if you have any.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 No.
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 Roll call.
Roll call.
Roll call.
Councilor Nelson.
Yes.
Councilor Mercer.
Yes.
Councilor Johnson.
Yes.
Councilor Sickman.
Yes.
Councilor McMahon.
No.
Councilor Reisner.
No.
Mayor Jacob Ellis.
No.
But we need to address this in the future.
So the motion, for clarity, the motion carried, so.
So you need to
Okay.
get your...
All right. Motion carried.
It gets removed?
Yes.
Yes. And we'll
Wait,
we'll address it.
Irene,
All right. Let's move
you
on
and
to...
the library group did a super job on this.
Thank you. I'll pass
Been
that on
working
to them.
really diligently, I know on it.
All right.
Amongst us.
13, discussion of water system high pressure zone.
She says, get me out of here.
Chief Monty and Public Works Supervisor Scott Tabor will address this issue.
I'd like to go
Give me-
take a break.
He's got pictures.
Can we take a break?
Why?
All right.
Dominic, can we take a break for a couple minutes?
No, let's just get through this, because we still got to get to House Bill 2800, which is going to take
Oh,
time.
for crying out loud.
Evening, councilors, mayor. Originally, this staff report came forward and could have been taken care of as communication, but I guess between the three of us, we felt that it should be open for discussion. Part of the reason that we're here today is the water system up in the upper end of Gladstone, as outlined in this report. It functions today. We will continue to use it if we need to, but with the change in counselors that we have now, with the approval of the sewer water plan, and they're all coming together, and we understand where the city is economically, but we just want to make you aware that there is a system up there that has an issue, and we're here for open questions.
So I think one of just the first questions we just need to clarify, it's not really a high, and you and I talked, it's not really a high pressure per se, it's just, it's the elevation we're talking about, is that correct? It's not pressure.
It is on the high-pressure system at the highest point of elevation in the city, which is supplied via our Webster pump station. The situation, and I'll go through these pictures real quick, is these are from Devonshire. In 2012, we had 2 back-to-back water main breaks, and before that, during that summertime, even in 2011 and 10 and prior, during the times that the fire department was flowing hydrants, we had multiple breaks up in that area during this time. I've worked with Fire Marshal Funk. I've reduced the pressure to that area up there by about 6 pounds since 2012, and it's not the system that's bad, it's the piping. We have an exorbitant amount of asbestos concrete pipe in that area. It's installed in a very poor fashion behind curb, along with multiple other utilities that we have to be aware of. And what happens when we're flowing hydrant is, of course, our pumps at that pump station ramp up to deliver that certain amount of GPM and pressure to sustain that during those flows, so they can have a static pressure of so much and a residual pressure so that people can still use water during that time of flowing. what that does when they close the hydrant is there's going to be a little bit of a lag time when those pumps are still putting out as much GPM or gallons per minute as possible, and when that finally drops back down. That pipe expands, and at that point it breaks, or it will cause it to delaminate from the inside. Some of the pictures on that I've shown you are showing the AC pipe that it looks like it's just split all the way down. If you cut them in half and look, you'll see that they're almost like a core of a paper towel roll that's been unraveled. And the pipe, because of its that style, will do that during these times of fire flows. So we have not had a leak since the moratorium on flowing fire hydrants in that high-level system at that area. Part of our fears is, that is the very first picture, we have trees growing on top of our mains. At one leak prior to this 2012 break, I had to remove 3 40-foot tall pine trees that were growing over that. This piping also goes between houses where we cannot access them. We have some coming off of Devonshire going between houses, then it runs parallel behind houses on Shadow Court and other areas in town. Very poor installation. It should be out in the street. There's things that we need to do. These were addressed in our master plan for our water system, resulting from the replacement of the AC pipe. I would suggest that we look actively at starting a replacement. The good news in this area is that if we go to replace it, we can put it out in the street without disturbing the existing piping, because once you disturb that piping and bring it above ground, it becomes hazardous material. So we want you to hear our concerns over this, to make sure you understand why we're not flowing hydrants up in that area, and the necessity of trying to get that system and the replacement of all asbestos concrete pipe within the city, starting in that area, completed as soon as possible. 2 cents? Quick.
So the other question there is then on, the hydrant flowing is not as big of an issue, I don't believe, but the question is, on a house fire, do you anticipate having the same kind of problems? And you probably would say you have no idea.
That I cannot answer. I hope first of all, we do not have a fire that we have to use the fire hydrants. I hope if we do have to use the fire hydrants that they are workable, and I do hope during that time of usage that we won't see a break because it's not contracting, you're using a lot of water. It's when that lead lag time between a high pressure going to a lower one where you start seeing that type of piping. It's very brittle. It's just, it was cheap. I'm sorry. That's why they put it in. That was cheap.
So what you're asking, what we need to do is, when we start replacing water pipes, this is where we need to start.
It would be a good area to start, along with all the rest of recommended from our master plans that we have. I believe there's also, inclusive of that plan, not just the type of piping, but the size of piping supplying that area is also in question. But what I guess I would like to see council do is embrace the policy of replacing asbestos concrete piping within the city, and do so in an expedient manner, over the next 6-7 years. The hydrants will work, but what we don't know is will the main sustain that fluctuation of pressure.
But what you're telling me is that we're going to have to lay new pipe in that whole area and just abandon the current pipe,
leave it in there.
Right.
You don't want to take it above ground.
Sure.
When we fix a water main break on those, which you look on the very back pictures, you'll see that pipe. That pipe has now been removed, and we paid for it to go to Arlington
at
a landfill.
So we can just leave it in the ground?
You don't want to touch it.
Okay.
If it stays in the ground, according to current standards.
Mm-hmm. Never know what happens.
I don't know what's coming down the street, so I mean that's where that's at.
Okay. So what steps do you guys need to take to get this going?
The city has a lot of choices to make in front of them. When this one comes up, we want you to be aware of it. I consider it a risk right now.
Mm-hmm.
My officers and engineers are aware of what's up there in the system. They have it in the back of their mind. If we lose a line, we're going to look at what we can shut down. We're going to be bringing in other equipment to shuttle water or run a relay system. Part of something we want to do. Right. But we want this new council to understand there's a liability out there that we we want to share with you.
Right. No, I appreciate
One of the difficulties of this area is when we shut down that portion of the main, we had to shut the entire Sherwood Forest out of water. We have, after the last 2012 break, we did what we call an insert a valve. We installed a valve on a live pipe using new techniques that we paid for. So now we have a valve, and we can isolate at least that one section of street and still supply water to the rest of the area. We've taken measures on that one, but we can only do that so far. If something between hither and yon breaks between where that valve is not, then you're looking at shutting down the entire area up there. And every bit of it is behind curbs. And these pictures are indicative of what's there. You have houses that have retaining walls and rock displays and everything else. And people really don't like you digging up their driveways. The last leak up there prior to, on 2012 in July, the gentleman who owned the house, I was looking at the tree that his father gave him, and he planted. His father is long gone, but I was this close to having to dig that thing up just to get to the water main.
Do most of the owners of those residents that have...
No, they don't.
They don't know?
They don't know until it's too late.
Yeah, okay.
My fear is if we have a catastrophic break, when that does, it lifts up the poor gentleman, it lifts up sidewalks, it lifts up driveways, it blisters the street 30 feet in directions. If we have the same similar type failure in that area that runs behind houses, I'm worried that the city of Gladstone may buy a $300,000, $400,000 house up there because it will destroy it. Water does not care when it's under pressure escaping from a pipe, where it goes and how it does it. These are the things that, concern us. Fire department's been working very closely, and I work very closely with them. It's very important that you understand that we have this issue. We have the means and mechanisms to put something in place to start replacing things, and that's in our water master plan. I wish I had great news for you, but I just don't.
Well,
So what was the thinking to even run it behind houses, and why...
Want to get me started, Pat?
cheaper.
It was cheap. It was cheaper.
There's no bedding on this. They just use native backfill.
I didn't put the picture in there. My guy's in there with live power lines laying next to them as we're power, phone, cable, gas are all in the same common ditch. Now, I don't know if you've ever worked in that type of field before, but it's very difficult not to destroy something while you're digging it up. That's why we've been using our sweeper quite a bit in hydro excavating. But then again, nothing more fun than being totally wet and holding on to a very nice conductor of aluminum when you're next to a high voltage line. And things happen. So it's a very dangerous process, but we get it done, and we do a very good job at doing it without tearing up everything.
Are we needing to wait for these other...
No. Our other master plans?
Plans, right. So we need to start making some decisions, is what you're asking.
So right now, the water fund, for instance, has built up a reserve and can start doing some capital projects. But to do it at the level that's outlined in the master plan, that would take some change in rates to accomplish that. But we can prioritize AC pipe replacement at this point, and we should focus on that area.
I have more faith in our 80-year-old cast iron pipe than I do in our 40-year-old AC pipe. And that's down in this area here. This pipe was put in the late 60s, early 70s, and I don't know if that's just a bad batch in that area of that part of town or what, but we've had more problems up there than what we are due. So.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Sam. Thank you. All right. Item number 14, Senate Bill 2800. I apologize to you guys for being last on the agenda, but we have representative from Clackamas County, and I think representatives from Tri-Cities and Oregon City. So,
Mr. Mayor, I had talked to Mr. Paulson prior to the meeting, and I thought Oregon City could go first and then followed by Clackamas County.
Okay.
If you're amenable to that?
I'm here for the long duration. Take as much time as you want.
Mayor Jacob Ellis, and councilors. My name's Bill Kveisman. I'm the city attorney for Oregon City, and thank you for being here. We'll try and keep it as short as we can, knowing it's getting later. But it's an important issue to Oregon City, and I assume it's also an important issue to Gladstone as well as Westland, to talk about the governance of Tri-Cities and what's happening. I want to quick give you some background that you probably already know, but I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. Highlight some concerns that Oregon City has, and then talk about the solution that we've proposed. So first, I want to talk about, we've got a PowerPoint. While we're waiting for that, I'm going to go ahead and keep going with what I can. So Tri-Cities is a county service district. It was formed in the late 80s. And it serves essentially the residents of Gladstone, Oregon City, and Westland with sewer service. There's a chunk, a very small piece of unincorporated Clackamas County in Tri-Cities, and I know that there's a portion of Gladstone that's outside of Tri-Cities. I mentioned it's a county service district, and that's important because typically when we think about special districts, we think about single-purpose, single-entity districts, water district, a fire district, a irrigation district. That's formed for one reason and one reason only. You've got people who serve on the board who come from that district. County service district is sort of a different beast, and what it is a district formed by the county through the voters. And by default, the governing body of the district is the county board of governors. So you can have districts that are smaller than the entire county, with the board of commissioners serving as their governing body. You can also have multiple county service districts within the same county doing different things. So it's not quite the same as most single-purpose districts. And so, what does that mean? It raises some issues that come up. And the biggest issue, why don't we go right to slide number 4, if we could. Is representational. What you can have is members of the governing body that don't live within the district that's affected by it. And you can also have multiple districts representing, the one governing body representing multiple districts with competing interests. I think the map demonstrates the first issue fairly well. The red dots are generally where the County Board of Commissioners live, and there's a Tri-City. So we've got several. As a member of a governing body of a city, that strikes you as something a little odd, and so that's one of the first issues we have. A second issue is the rates. They're not the ones paying the rates. They're not talking to their neighbors about these rates, and it causes issues. If you look at the graph up here, the green line essentially is inflation. It's set at 3%. The blue line was the rates that Tri-Cities came to the advisory committee with last August and said, these are expected rates for the foreseeable future. Then in December, we got the red line that gave us an accelerated rate issue. And there's several things problematic with that. First, the volatility. As I assume Gladstone is, Oregon City is in the process of doing their budget. And when you have, here's our projections, oh no, we've got significant difference from what we thought we were. Trying to plan for that, whether you're in government, business, anywhere, it makes it difficult when you don't know what's coming down the pipe. Probably the bigger issue is just the amount of increase. When you look at the inflation, saw those numbers, and that's one of the things that struck us is, boy, there's got to be something happening here. The Tri-City must be having some real cash issues. And we looked at the budget, and the Tri-Cities has a operating budget of about $8.7 million a year and cash reserves of $7.5, about 87% of operating expenses. That struck us. Certainly it's more than we keep as a city. And there may be reasons for that, but at the same time, those numbers were somewhat striking when we're looking at the significant rate increases that were headed our way. A third issue that comes up when we're looking at this is the record of sewer management. We've got relatively recently the director of WES, and I skipped over this at the end of the slide. One of the important things we talked about, it's a county service district. The county has several different districts, but they're all contract with the county and the Department of Water Environment Services for management and running the district. And so WES is the county department that runs Tri-City as well as CCSD. And a couple years ago, we had a director who was fired for mishandling public funds, improperly procuring some interest. We also have some instability with 4 WES directors in less than 2 years and hiring a 5th. We also had the illegal firing of a whistleblower that led to a payout of nearing $1 million. And that money came from ratepayers, Tri-Cities, as well as CCSD1 and other parts of the county. Another consequence we run into, and this gets back to Wes serving as a manager of both Tri-Cities and CCSD, is you've got contracts between those entities being negotiated by the same body. It's the County Board of Commissioners pulling off one hat, putting on another hat. And we end up with multiple contracts that have signature pages that look like this. It's an agreement between Tri-City and Clackamas County, both signed by the county board, Lynn Peterson in this case, and there's a variety of those, some of those including the county and other folks. Another thing that raised Oregon City's concern is we had issues with this, and we've tried multiple times over the years under several mayors and city managers to address it. And this is just one example. A couple of years ago, David Frazier, the Oregon City manager, requested to place some items on an agenda, and the response was essentially, nope, we're not going to put that on there until the Board of County Commissioners tell us we can put that on the agenda. And to make it clear, this was not the Tri-Cities agenda. This was a Tri-City Advisory Committee. West Lynn, Oregon City, and Gladstone all have members. They're represented on the Tri-Cities Advisory Committee, and that's supposed to be our city's voice in the governance of Tri-Cities. So to summarize, we've got board members who don't live in the district and aren't subject to the rates. We've got a record of SOAR, the management issues, unstable leadership. We've got one commission signing for multiple districts with competing interests, and the county not wanting to deal with some of these concerns that we've had over the years. So what the city wasn't getting much traction with the Tri-Cities or the county, so we decided to try a different route, and we decided to come up, House Bill 2800 was our solution. So what does the bill do? You have a copy of it in your packet. It doesn't require any change. So that's the bottom line. There's no change. What it does is give the opportunity for cities that are being served. We have a county service district that provides most of its service to people within cities, gives those cities an opportunity to essentially take over those county service districts. In this case, it would require concerted action by Gladstone, as well as Oregon City and West Lynn, to all decide they want to do that. It empowers the local representatives to have a voice in district decision. Essentially closes a loophole that allows a county service district to provide urban services that mainly to city residents. One important thing that it does is it doesn't disrupt any contract. It specifically calls for all contracts and either between CCSD and Tri-Cities to remain in place, or contracts between TCSD and the union. The day-to-day workings don't change. What this is about governance at the 30,000-foot level, looking at rates, looking at how do we make our deals with people into the future. So it's really about governance at a real fundamental level. So, in conclusion, one thing I want to note is that the structure that we anticipated doing, where we base this on, is South Fork. There's a history of intergovernmental agreements between cities, between West Lynn and Oregon City and South Fork, that's provided water for those cities for decades with a pretty good record. And then we wanted to come up with a model that allowed that to happen. So we Oregon City adopted Resolution 1504, authorizing and supporting the Local Utility Reform Act. I want to note that both the Oregon City Business Alliance as well as the Government and Economic Affairs Committee of the Oregon City Chamber of Commerce have endorsed House Bill 2800, and what we're doing is asking your support for House Bill 2800 and looking at providing the opportunity for the change in the governance of Tri-City Sewer District. With that, available for any questions. We also have the city manager as well as Public Works Director. City manager and mayor tied up at the Urban Renewal Agency.
I've got one or two. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. So who wrote this?
Legislative Council. The way the process works in Salem is you get a concept to Legislative Council, and they draft the bill. So what happened is we put together a concept, gave it to Representative Brent Barton, the representative or senator to...
So a lawyer did?
Probably.
Okay. Because in the Constitution it says it needs to be written in plain language. This isn't.
That's...
I'm just asking. Because I'm thinking, sorry, but it talks about city this and city that, but what city? And, you just told us that, well, it takes all three of us to do something, but the way I read this, you guys can go off and do whatever you want.
And I several different layers to that. First, in terms of Legislative Council, we've had discussions with Legislative Councils, and they're drafting bills for many years, and I urge you to take your concerns to them because they're the only ones who can introduce legislation. In terms of the cities, I would also suggest you ask the city attorney to take a look because it's, to me at least, it's fairly clear that we can't take any action without our partners in Gladstone and Westland going along with it.
I have a question. Go ahead. What are you asking of us, and what is the urgency?
We're asking you to support House Bill 2800. And the urgency is that we have a current legislative session that's going on. I believe the end date is set for sometime in June. You never know how what happens with those. But as the legislative session moves on, bills start dropping, and so to the extent we can get your support, we think that could help move House Bill 2800.
What happens if we look at this again in the next legislative session? What happens here locally?
Most likely, it continues as it is now.
Okay. Great.
How many votes are there?
I don't know the answer to that question. It's probably fluid depending on what's happening, and as if you've been involved in
100? 1,000?
I'm sorry.
Votes for what, Tom?
For this issue on the House bill.
Members of the House.
Yeah.
I don't know how many there are. I think the legislative session is still fluid, and in terms of who is going to vote for what and how that goes, I don't think we have firm commitments one way or the other on many legislation.
And how many votes are us? One, I believe.
In terms of us, you mean the city of Gladstone?
Right.
Yeah, and there's relatively limited, but that's the nature of legislation. You have a sponsor who comes from one area and looks for support throughout the state.
So, passage of this House bill would give Tri-Cities the opportunity to change the governance.
It would give the three cities the opportunity to change the government of Tri-City.
Wasn't the governance set up by a vote of the people?
Governance was set by a vote of the people back in 1980. That was, I think I heard something about, the pipes that were in the ground in the 70s wearing out, and maybe it's time for a fresh look.
So this could be another vote of the people getting struck away by a government pin?
That's certainly one way to look at it.
Somebody brought up the urgency. What is the urgency as of now? I know you came to us, Oregon City came to us some time ago and asked us, and we says, we're just getting started, can you hold off and wait? And within 3 weeks I've had to learn more about the governance of Tri-City sewer system than I really cared to learn.
Understood.
What is the urgency this session?
We've outlined Oregon City's concern. These are not new concerns that have just popped up. This has gone on for some time, and basically, to the extent it doesn't pass in this session, the same situation carries on over. And from the city's perspective, the governance discussion should happen sooner rather than later.
Okay.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. I appreciate it and hanging out.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Do I have to move?
Clackamas County? Yes, sir. Tri-Cities or West, I guess, would be the proper title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. I'm Greg Geist. I'm the interim director of WES. I've met several of you. We had you at the facility recently, and I think we have an open invitation to the rest of you folks to come visit us. So I'm just going to go over some basic history and some current issues that we're having at the district today. And then Commissioner Savas and Chris Story from County Council's office will talk more about 2800. As a staff person, it's not my role. So this is the Tri-City Service District. Just want to get you geographically oriented. Those are the three cities. The picture is the facility essentially as it was constructed in 1986. I'll be talking a little bit about the white tanks in the top of that picture. Those are our digesters, and that's a current concern that we have. I'll talk a little bit more about that. So, a little history. Tri-City Service District was formed in 1980 by voters. It was the result of a 1977 building moratorium that was, I believe, put on by DEQ because there was failing facilities. The Gladstone and Oregon City used to share a facility that was located off of Highway 99 where the McDonald's is today. So what Tri-Cities did is consolidated 3 facilities, that facility and 2 for Westland on the other side of the river. The Tri-City wastewater treatment plant was originally completed in 1986. Go ahead, Chris. So just a few more facts. We are governed by an advisory committee. Informs the Board of County Commissioners. That's the 3 city managers as well as the West Director. We have budget committee that approves the budget. That's 5 members from the public as well as the 5 Board of County Commissioners. And then another thing I want to get into some detail about is this intergovernmental agreement. Next thing I'm going to show you is both of the districts on a map and how they're currently operating in cooperation. So this shows in the upper part there, that's CCSD number 1, Clackamas County Service District number 1. Lower part is Tri-City Service District. The black, what we call Intertie 1, that was a pipeline that went in. Again, I think that there was some problems with compliance with the Clean Water Act at the Kellogg wastewater treatment plant. And so the districts worked together and said, hey, Tri-City, you have some excess capacity. We need to reduce the amount of waste that we're sending to our Kellogg facility. So how about we build this pipeline and you can rent us space. Treatment capacity. So that went in 99 to 2000, I believe. More recently, in 2011, as an outgrowth of that 2008 intergovernmental agreement, we put in Intertie 2, and that will be followed by Intertie 3 in a few years. So again, bringing more sewage from CCSD number 1 down to the Tri-City facility, which was an agreement that was made between the districts and approved by the Board of County Commissioners. So this is the facility as it exists today. You see the same 2 digesters up at the top that were built in 1986, and a new facility down in the lower left-hand corner of that facility. That's the facility that CCSD purchased, paid for it with $89 million. They also, at that time, in addition to having paid rent, essentially, for treatment capacity, bought into that facility to the tune of $4 million. So that was a transfer from CCSD number 1 to Tri-City Service District. I won't get into the rate issue too much, other than to say that generally those rent payments and that initial buy-in helped keep the Tri-City rates low for a number of years. Artificially low, to the point where they weren't covering operating expenses. So in June of 2013, we did our most recent master plan. However, it had some caveats, one of which, the most important, the bottom one, is that it was based on population estimates that we received in 2011. What we found is those population estimates haven't played out, at least in the near term. We expect that they're probably fine on a 20-year cycle, but right now, as you probably know, that we're having a little bit better economic times, and we've had significantly, to the tune of twice as much growth between the districts as we anticipated. A couple examples. So, those digesters, those tanks, again, built in 1986, we discovered that well, there's a couple things that I should probably go over. One is, they were constructed in 1986. They've accepted all the growth that's happened in the district since then. There was a conscious decision made by Wes to extend the life of those by going to what we call parallel digestion. So we typically operate those in series. Everything at our facility, for those that have been there, we have redundancy. We have at least 2 of everything, because if something breaks or we need to do maintenance, we always have to have that redundancy to protect water quality and public health. So there was a decision made to run both of those digesters together to increase their capacity. What that did is it gave additional solids handling capacity for some number of years. And what we anticipated, based on that 2011 growth curve, was that it would get us 10, 11 years out into the future. What we're seeing now, though, is the growth that we're actually experiencing. We could be out of capacity in our digesters in as little as 4 years. So obviously this raised big red flags for me, and we said we need to start talking to people about this. So we went to our advisory committees. We've been to many of the cities already, and we ultimately went to our county commissioners. This is another example of something that we wanted to get out there. Was, well, we did a 20-year growth plan. These digesters were in the plan, again, 10 or 11 years out. And since we needed to move them forward, we said, well, clearly that could have if that is indeed what we need to do, that's going to have a significant rate impact. So again, we wanted to get as much information out to as many people as possible to signal what the consequences here could be, and that we needed to have a conversation about how to address this issue. So, actually I didn't mention it, but the industry standard for looking at capacity is 80%. Once you reach 80% of capacity of any treatment process, you better start looking for what you're going to add. Well, we're 60% overloaded in our original digester configuration, clearly above the industry standard for when to take a look at that kind of thing. So what we did is we went to, there's been no decisions made about rates or even about what to do ultimately with this digestion capacity issue. But we went to the board and said, hey, we need to really take a hard look at this, and here's what we recommend is reconvening a regional capacity advisory committee that encompasses both districts and was originally convened in, I think, 2008, 2009 to do just this thing, which is to look at mutual investments when it comes to capacity between the districts. So we're meeting with city councils now. We're having multiple meetings with the River Health and the Tri-City Advisory Committees, and we're hoping to get recommendations on this issue from a whole host of folks by November of 2015. That's when we'll know what we're going to do. There was also some issues or questions in other venues, frankly, brought up about the financial health of WES, and I just wanted to point out that we have a pretty rigorous audit process, and we've received actually awards for the past 15 years. So that's my part. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
Hypothetically, if CCSD did not exist and did not come and use our reserve capacity for future growth, which has been euphemistically called excess capacity, where would TCSD be today?
TCSD would have overloaded digesters.
Okay.
Simply based on the...
Would it just be a matter of building more digesters then, or would there have been more plant, or...
you know, the liquids handling capacity is still there. It's really the solids handling capacity that's limited at this point. And again, that's limited when you looked at those numbers, how far overloaded it was. The flows from CCSD account for about 20% of the average annual flow that comes to the Tri-City facility.
Right.
So, I mean, the digesters are overloaded with or without CCSD contribution.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for your patience, gentlemen. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to this issue. My name is Chris Story. I'm with the County Counsel's Office. And I bet after that presentation you're thinking to yourself, are we talking about the same subject? Oregon City was talking about governance and rates, and we're up here talking about digesters and solids and things that probably stink if you have to deal with them. And there's a reason for that, is that there's two conversations that have been happening, and that's part of the dialogue that's been the background behind the 2800 coming up. The county's position, the management, the staff's position has been we have really urgent needs from an infrastructure standpoint to avoid violating the Clean Water Act and protecting public health and the environment and ensuring that we have the opportunity for economic development to occur. Oregon City has, I think, and I will say fairly, raised the issue of governance, and the board's response has been, that's an important issue, we agree with you, but we really think this other issue of how do we avoid moratoriums and having sewage spills in the river is more important. We'd like to have that discussion first. And that has led to, I think, some frustration on the part of Oregon City, and you start to have the conversation that we have today. So when we talk about House Bill 2800 and the proposal from the City of Oregon City that this governance be changed, we have, I think, differing lenses in which we're looking at it. The first lens from the county perspective is let's make some decisions about how we're going to manage the infrastructure, and then we can take care of conversations around the governance, and I think Oregon City would like to reverse that conversation. What we are talking about with House Bill 2800, I will note, though, is adding a third way that you can change governance for a county service district. Right now, there is a procedure in place where you can change the governance from county service districts are governed under ORS 451, and under ORS 450, you can be your own independently elected school district, such as Oak Lodge, right next to you. That process is available by election right now. We also have, as they mentioned, the model that they proposed of South Fork Water Board does not require a statutory change. ORS 190 would allow the creation of some sort of partnership between municipalities right now without changing a thing. So this is a third mechanism that you could look at to potentially address governance. Our position, of course, is two mechanisms seems to be a pretty reasonable way, especially making sure that voters can have the opportunity to weigh in. When we have had this conversation, I have to admit there's some issues that Oregon City have raised, and I will get to those, but before I do, I wanted to dwell on the point that I thought was raised very appropriately, which is, what's the urgency? Why now? Because proposing a bill of this nature is a fairly radical step. Tri-City Service District is not the only service district in the county. There are 9, and Gladstone is part of 2, but there are dozens and dozens of them all throughout the state. When this proposal was put forward, there was a quick response all across the state from other districts that said, hey, we like our system just fine. Why are you trying to change it? Why now? What gave rise to this? And I'm just going to give the disclaimer. This is just me. This is just my opinion. I'm not talking on behalf of the board at this moment, just my perception. I noticed a significant change in attitude in the advisory committee meetings in which the district was participating when Oregon City proposed a right-of-way ordinance that applied, in their view, to the Tri-City Service District. And the right-of-way ordinance then levied a charge on the Tri-City Service District for the use of certain Oregon City right-of-ways to reach the plant. That charge is approximately $200,000 a year. When that issue was discussed at the Tri-City Advisory Committee meeting, Oregon City's proposal was that the Tri-City District ratepayers collectively would pay that $200,000. The ultimate recommendation that came out of the advisory committee that was implemented by the board was that a surcharge would be applied just in Oregon City so that ratepayers in Gladstone and West Lynn would not have to pay that extra surcharge. The vote was 3-1. There were a couple other debates around policy issues in the Tri-City Service District, and again, the vote was 3-1. So my purely personal perception is Oregon City was not achieving the policies that they desired, and so that they felt that a challenge to governance might be an appropriate path right now. But I would like to note that we're not saying that the issues raised are inappropriate or wrong. Indeed, we're open to the conversation. Part of the process that the county has put forward in its letter has been to say we would like to have a regional conversation around this issue because the options proposed in House Bill 2800 may be too limiting for what you would like to have on the table. part of the challenge, and the reason why Greg talked about the $89 million investment from CCSD1, their $4 million equity buy-in, is because if you're talking about management of the Tri-City plant, you're not talking just to Gladstone, Oregon City, and West Lynn. You're also talking to your partners, who are co-owners in the facility. And when you're talking about the opportunity for additional investment, you might be better off sharing the load rather than concentrating it on a smaller population. Whether that's the policy decision that gets made is up to you and your representatives in the regional group, but we didn't want to cut off the possibility of that conversation. As we go forward, the board has proven its willingness to have that governance discussion. I'm sure you're familiar that in November, the board put a measure on the ballot to change the governance of NCPRD, the Parks District just to the north of you. Several citizens approached the board and said that they would like to have a different independent governance from the board. The board agreed. They put it on the ballot. It didn't pass, but the board has demonstrated that if there is a serious interest, they're willing to listen to the citizens. And they think the vote is a great mechanism for making that happen rather than House Bill 2800. I have to say, Commissioner Reisner, I read House Bill 2800 the same you did, which is to say a single city could make the decision for everybody else. And I think that would be an inappropriate approach, knowing especially that when you're talking about forming a partnership between three cities and how they're having to govern, you would hope you would be consulted ahead of time. I'll just note that it doesn't appear you were on House Bill 2800, which is why we're here tonight. I hope you will join me in opposing this bill because I think it is a bridge too far in trying to solve a problem that is a little further down the road than the immediate one that's facing us right now, which is infrastructure, and what we're going to do about the challenges from regulatory environment and making sure that we can protect human health and the environment. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Savas for our final concluding remarks. Thank you.
Mayor, councilors, good evening. Just going to give a little bit of background about myself so you understand my institutional memory and involvement in this. So I've been involved in the observing the sewer discussions and dialogue for about 15 years. I served on the Oak Lodge Water Board in 2001. I became interested and started attending Oak Lodge sanitary meetings when discussions were taking place about the regional needs as far as infrastructure with regard to sewer. I ran for election in 2003, the Oak Lodge Sanitary Board, and got engaged in the regional discussions at that period of time as a representative from Oak Lodge Sanitary. I will tell you that despite what you heard tonight from the Oregon City representatives, there's quite a bit of misunderstanding apparently as to the facts, which I heard both Thursday at the chamber meeting and both again heard tonight, which I will try to address. I will first read what I read at the Oregon City thing here, and that is that the discussion about governance had come up. It actually came up, and it was actually settled in 2008, 2009. And that IGA is an example of that, followed by the bylaws, which were approved for the Regional Wastewater Advisory Committee, which you are a member of. You have one vote on that group. That discussion occurred, and Oregon City was in the lead, was one of the cities in the lead of that discussion, and chose just what they chose today. So the structure that you have, with the structure that we have today, is precisely what everyone agreed to. So here it is with a different council, maybe different staff at the city, and suddenly governance is an issue. I don't disagree that it could be improved. I talked to some of you about that, and I think the county is willing to have that discussion, but in more of a structured fashion. We sent letters and correspondence to the City of Oregon City. You've been copied on those, expressing that. And the first meeting for that regional discussion is scheduled for March 25th, I believe. So we're ready to go on that. I will say that with the IGA and how these things were actually, the IGA was actually done, is that both parties, CCSD1 and Tri-Cities, each party negotiated for their position. As a matter of fact, the Oregon City manager at the time was quite instrumental in the $4 million buy-in to the plant. So that was just one example where they actually lobbied. Now, of course, this was a cooperative agreement, and yes, the same attorney did draft the agreement, but negotiated with both sides. So I will say that. Tri-Cities and CCSD advisory committees meet routinely. They set the rates, not the Board of County Commissioners. They set the rates initially, it goes through the budget committees, and it's approved by that. And to my recollection, the Board of County Commissioners has never, again, to my recollection, has not implemented and approved what came out of the advisory committees. These advisory committees are very powerful because of the representation and situation that's before us, and that is that you have Tri-Cities. Often, county commissioners don't live there. You have CCSD. Quite often, county commissioners don't live there either. That's why these advisory boards were actually formed. If Oregon City decides to raise a governance issue, it really should be with all the partners. You don't have someone cooperatively a few years ago provide $89 million investment in the treatment plant and suddenly forget that they're not part of the solution here, or not part of the governance discussion. So I think it's kind of unfair not to include the other districts in this discussion. The fact that the county commissioners do not reside in the district is not uncommon in county service districts, but the county commissioners are elected by citizens in each of those districts. Special districts, such as port districts, do not require any personal connection to port activities. Urban renewal districts do not require any residency, and often some urban renewal districts have no residence whatsoever. I will note that cemetery districts may have a deceased person vote every now and again, but the deceased cannot run for office as near as I know. I like what I heard at the Westland City Council when they referred to the county commissioner's role in this as more of a board of trustees. They unanimously also indicated their opposition to 2800. I heard concerns about environmental responsibility from them, from stewardship of clean water, healthy rivers. Not too long ago, when I was serving on the Oak Lodge Sanitary Board, we stepped up and spent $59 million to rehab our plant. That was approved by the voters in 2009. As I mentioned, CCSD stepped up, spent $89 million, but actually it was over $100 million between all the other facilities that they spent. So they spent $100 million, bonded for $100 million, so they have stepped up to the plate. The digesters that we referred to earlier, they were actually due to be built in 2003. That's why the discussion started in 2003. They were deferred. They were deferred like a lot of other projects around, and you are experiencing that tonight with your water pipes and so forth. We can only do so much in so much period of time, and there's so much rate sensitivity that we have to just work with our citizens as best we can. However, that got kicked to 2013. The recession hit, so that bought us some more time. So now we're just flat running out of time for digester capacity. We are facing serious issues with regards to meeting growth requirements in both districts, CCSD1 and Tri-Cities, and we are facing stricter DEQ requirements with both districts. In my opinion, it is in the best interest of all our citizens and the environment to work together, and with both districts working together, we can provide the lowest possible rates. Tri-Cities has enjoyed the lowest rates in the region. Tri-City voters have been well served by the city manager advisory board model, frankly. A lot of the decisions to run the rates artificially low in the red for all those years was a policy decision that was made years ago, prior to Mr. Boyce, prior to Mr. Jordan, prior to Mr. Frazier of Oregon City, and prior even to the manager over at Tri-Cities or West. When I became a commissioner in 2011, I attended all the Tri-City meetings, and I suggested a different representation model, knowing that this rate shock issue would come up. They did raise the rates to get out of running in the red into the black, and that was just accomplished just this year, this fiscal year. I raised those issues because I saw this coming. I knew the digesters were due, and they were again originally scheduled for the period of time I mentioned. I encourage everyone to review those agreements and attend the regional meeting on March 25th. What I heard about the director of WES, I was there when he was hired, I believe in 2005, 2006, and he was let go for reasons I cannot discuss, but That actually happened this summer, not 2 years ago. There was a couple interim directors in that period of time, and we are in the closing phases of actually replacing that director, and the current interim director is actually one of those candidates. As far as multiple mayors attempting, I heard earlier that multiple mayors attempted to change the governance. I think I addressed that when I first opened, that I have attended most of all the regional sewer meetings for the last 15 years, so I don't recall that other than in 2008, 2009, again, by those IGAs and by the bylaws we agreed upon. That's what we came up with. So the recent claim was that the Oregon City Manager stated that he did provide that email over the weekend. I did see it, but it did not come to the attention of the Board of County Commissioners, nor to come up in an advisory board meeting that I can recall early on, 2 years ago. I do recall it being more recent. I was described by Mr. Story. So I guess that's really all I have tonight, but I'm here to answer any questions, and I'm sure there's probably at least one.
The March 25th meeting, what's that again?
That is the first meeting for the Regional Wastewater Advisory Board meeting, and Gladstone has a seat on that table. So that will include one seat from Oregon City, one from Gladstone, one from West Lynn, Damascus, Milwaukee, Happy Valley, and one from unincorporated.
And the TCSD Advisory Committee, how often do they usually meet, like in a year?
Usually quarterly, so no less than quarterly.
Go ahead, Kim. Get something?
I keep hearing about the $4 million buy-in. I went through the IGA, and I'm assuming you're talking about Section 2.5. It goes through and lists what comes up to close to $4 million, and then it specifies the ground lease payment, the ROI payment, and the opportunity payment together are the rent for this purpose. It doesn't sound like it's a buy-in, it sounds like it's rent. But I keep hearing the term buy-in. Am I confused on where I'm looking where the $4 million come from?
No, I believe that's correct.
I'm happy to address that. What we did to structure it, because there was concerns from CCSD1 when this deal was being negotiated between the advisory committees. They said, what assurances do we have if we spend $89 million there that we'll be able to own what we're building? You know, it's like, do you build a brand new house on someone else's land? So we structured the agreement so that it's a ground lease, and they're leasing the land for 25 years. Then we figured in all the infrastructure, because the piece of the plant that they built is one component, but not a whole treatment plant. So you had the headworks, you had some of the pump works, you had the outfall, you had the digesters, and we figured out what the present value of those were and what their share of the use of that would be, and then we took that present value, and that became the return on investment. Basically, Tri-City ratepayers paid for that infrastructure, but it was going to be used by CCSD1, so they should get their equity. So the ground lease component was actually a relatively small portion of it. The ROI is the equity buy-in, and then the opportunity is because Tri-City had a plant, and CCSD1 wanted to use it, so they paid more than just actual cost for the opportunity to make that investment at the plant.
So it actually isn't a buy-in, it's a 25-year rent payment.
You could phrase it that way. Certainly the calculation for what the return on investment was based on the equity position of the Tri-City facility.
The other question I had is, as it was mentioned when you first came up, we're talking about two separate things. I asked them the question I would like to ask you. We're talking about a separate thing needing more capacity. What is the urgency?
Well, I think the urgency is the moratorium that we could be facing. We have about 4 years left. It'll take X amount of time to build it, and it'll be actually just in time if we actually move in the next several months.
A construction moratorium?
Construction, yeah. You got to realize this was built on top of a landfill. Okay, so we're going to open up a landfill. We're going to drive pilings, so this is not like we're working on just virgin ground here. This is difficult. It's very complicated construction to build this project.
What effect do you think a construction moratorium would have on Gladstone?
Well, and I suspected you were going to ask that question. When I will note, if you get to the moratorium, maybe you couldn't even build your city hall. Maybe you couldn't even build your library. But I will also note that part of the challenge is if we don't build the infrastructure, wastewater treatment plants have to treat whatever shows up. Our restriction is being able to discharge into the river. So if it shows up and we can't treat it, we're going to drive up our operating costs because we're going to have to handle it somehow. We're going to have to process it by taking it to someone else's digesters, haul it there, taking it to landfills, apply it there, all more expensive options. So there is the possibility of avoiding capital for a while, but it can show up on the operating side of the house. Yeah.
As we discussed earlier about our water pipes, our stormwater isn't much better either, as we discussed last year. So if you had less water going into the plant, it would probably process things better and last longer, wouldn't have the capacity, correct?
Actually, oddly, and I will know, I should have Greg up here, but there are 3 different components to capacity, and the one that we're most tight on, the bottleneck, is solids, which is to say the stuff in the water, not the water itself. The liquid side of the house is actually performing fairly well. And part of the challenge is actually with low-flow toilets and everything else, the volume of water has decreased, but the amount of stuff showing up has not. So it is processing the solids that is the bottleneck that we're concerned about. So while there may be real advantages to removing the I&I, the infiltration and inflow that you can experience from sewer pipes because of rainwater and older pipes, and that could potentially reduce our operating costs, that's not the bottleneck, and we would not be here with such urgency regarding that particular issue. It's the solids handling that's driving the conversation.
I've got to ask. Last June, I was at a Clackamas Cities Association dinner and talked with a couple of cohorts from West Lynn about this. And the thought is, why couldn't we just get all 4 entities, sit down in a room and work this out? Are we beyond that?
All 4 entities, so as far as
Oregon City, West Lynn, Gladstone, and you guys.
I don't think so. In fact, that's the hope that, frankly, this is a blip in the relationship because we've had 30 years of successful service as the utility supporting your city. However, I think the reason why we've suggested the regional committee is because after the $89 million investment, the table probably needs to include the representatives from CCSD number 1 as well. I'll note on the regional advisory committee, you actually have 1 1/3 vote because we wanted to make sure there was equity. So the 4 representatives from CCSD 1 have the same voting power as the 3 representatives from the Tri-City Service District.
But I was going to ask, as Oregon City brought up, when that was kind of started, you had the county commissioners as representing Tri-City, and the same commissioners representing, so I mean, it kind of stinks.
It's awkward, and frankly, that's why the IGA between the 2 districts, what the board did is said, you guys figure it out. Whatever you mutually propose to us, we're going to accept, and we're not going to change a word. And we basically it was the equivalent of shuttle diplomacy. We just went from one advisory committee to another, negotiating terms back and forth, proposals, counter-proposals, how are we going to allocate costs, how are we going to figure it out. The opportunity premium, frankly, was a proposal that came from the Tri-City group that said, we should be getting a little something. A little something, because we're the one that has the plant, and they're showing up and asking us for a favor. And CCSD1 didn't like that, but they agreed to it because it was a reasonable business term. And then when that agreement was reached between the 2 advisory committees, they both recommended to the board adoption of an IGA that they had drafted between the 2 of them, and then the board signed it and walked away.
So members of the different cities within CCSD, they have an advisory committee just like we do?
Yes. It's called the River Health Advisory Board. And so they actually send elected representatives for the most part, I would know. And as far as the regional group, I would like to know this is not a new thing, and it shouldn't be too scary. It was actually convened relatively recently. You may remember when the Blue Heron Mill shut down, that there was a lagoon associated with it. DEQ had been putting on new regulations on the Tri-City plant that would have impaired our ability to continue discharging in the summer because of temperature discharges, and we were anticipating an $80 to $130 million project to try and not have hot water while people could still have hot showers. And the opportunity came up of buying the lagoon and the Clean Water Act permit associated with Blue Heron, and that project looked to save us between $60 and $80 million by doing that. That proposal was not decided by the board. That proposal was brought to the regional committee and said, would the two districts like to invest in this project together for the opportunity to avoid future investment? And it was unanimously agreed and recommended that would be the course, so then the board approved that action and gave direction to staff to execute.
I'll jump in here. That is, as I mentioned earlier, I think this is the good side about this Oregon City bringing this up and bringing it to this level is that I think the conversation is due. I recognize that the system in 2011, as I stated, I started making recommendations to talk about representation. So I'm in agreement that we need to talk about it. I'm in agreement that we need to improve it. It's just a matter of how we do it and making sure we involve all the partners. And that's what's critical. I will say one thing that hasn't really been said, and we can talk about that at a different time, and that is that the plant, though it was built in the 80s, the Tri-Cities plant, it's nearing rehabilitation time. So there are, in the future, in the next 10, 15 years or so, you're going to be making investments in that. Investments similar to what Oak Lodge did. Investments similar to what Tri-Cities did as far as, not Tri-Cities, but CCSD went with their $89 million membrane expansion there. So, and also because the regulations are increasing, that plant's ability to meet those regulations, the old part of the plant, is pretty marginal. So you'll have to make improvements in that. There's a number of improvements that have to be made. So the benefit of working with the other committee or the other district is that if there's joint usage of that plant, there's joint ownership and share in investing in that plant as well. So that's a whole different conversation, but bear that in mind. I think that the idea of the governance is a good discussion, and just like you have our partner as an ORS 190 with Oak Lodge Water and not Happy Valley, but Mount Scott Water District. Is it the Mount Scott Water District? But the North Platte County Water Commission, you are partners in that. You have a vote, and you are representative on that. That's an ORS 190. So it'd be the same. That's one model. The ORS 190 model is one model towards governance that probably would be the best, to be the least complicated. So all the options are out there to be discussed in the future. So I urge you to take a position to oppose House Bill 2800 and work together with our partners to talk about governance in the near future in a very structured, agreeable, calm way.
Thank you, guys.
If I can just add one quick clarification to you asked, well, what's the need for urgency related to this digester project? And when we put this together, it could be a suite of projects that cost over $50 million. And that would take us a minimum of 3 years to put together and to get online. So when I'm seeing some projections that could show us out of capacity in 4 years, and a project that's going to take 3 to build if we start, that's my sense of urgency. And so part of what we did is we agreed to, or proposed, and the BCC supported, gathering more information about ultimately what we want to do, but that we want to proceed now with an RFP, which you heard about earlier, for the design of those. So should we need to build them as soon as possible, and that is the will, and that is the outcome, we're on that. We have that critical path to make sure that we don't run into a real capacity problem.
I mean, I thank everybody, and I guess we're going to have someone.
I'm going to be the quickest guy tonight, I guarantee you.
All right.
Kevin Johnson, 6970 Winfield Court. My thoughts on the Oregon City resolution and House Bill 2800 and the apparent pressure from Oregon City and their state representative for either a pro or con stand tonight. This is a complex issue and you do not have enough, let alone all of the information required to make such a stand. But if forced to vote, some things you should consider. This bill was written at the request of Oregon City and Oregon City alone. No input from West Linn or Gladstone, Oregon City's partners in the Tri-City Sewer District. Is it possible this is just an extension of their ongoing battle with Clackamas County? Why did the author of the bill, Brent Barton, Representative Brent Barton, not make an attempt to contact Oregon City's equal partners? Maybe it's just me. I'm not sure Brent Barton has ever supported a bill I thought was a good idea. From the Columbia River crossing to in-state tuition for illegals to driver's licenses for illegals, which was overturned by a vote of the people, to his latest, the motor voter bill. So if Brent Barton thinks this is a good idea, and I were you, I would be highly suspicious. I would also be suspicious of Oregon City. They are one of the main reasons this plant is in need of more capacity. Their estimate of growth was not anywhere near what has occurred. So what is their real agenda? To try and get West Linn and Gladstone to pay to fix something that is mostly their fault. Maybe they think if the county commissioners were out of the picture, this would be easier to accomplish. I would like to know how much Oregon City's sewer SDC funds goes into the plant for future expansion and not just the pipes in their city. Make no mistake, Gladstone ratepayers will be paying to enhance the Tri-City plant capacity problem that we had very little to do with creating. Tri-City Sewer District was created by a vote of the citizens, and changing the structure, whatever you want to call it, should require a vote of the same people. But just as seems to often happen, the state thinks they know better than we do. You should say no to any support of House Bill 2800, at least until you have all the information and completely understand it.
Yes, can you do it in 3 minutes or less? No.
So now, I can't resist.
Well, listen, we're really exhausted here, folks. I mean,
I want you to, you weren't here, but hear me out. Okay.
Limit your time, because we're tired.
Okay.
We're not probably hearing half of what
you weren't here the last time the slick guys came from Lake Oswego.
We're not here to bash. If you have something to say about House Bill 28...
When you weren't here, Lake Oswego came in here and talked this old city council, which wasn't you guys, into their big water pipe. They gave West Linn a blank check for $5 million. You got nothing.
Okay.
These are the guys that are basically going to overflow, take it over capacity. We have been built out for years.
Okay. I appreciate the fact that you have looked at different angles, but I don't think you're helping get us to a point where we can make a decision. Your personal opinion about who's slick and who isn't really has no bearing on what we're trying to do. That's just the way it is.
Because you're going to end up having to pay to build those digesters. You understand that, right?
I get all that.
Okay, so then you understand whose town has been built out for years and who is the main person.
I understand the facts that have been put out there, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Oregon City.
Make it short. Thank you. My name is John Lewis. I'm the Public Works Director, and the City Manager and the Mayor of Oregon City couldn't be here today. But I guess we recognize that there's two issues. The issue that we want to focus specifically on is the governance piece, and we recognize that it's a difficult issue and the timing is such. Our press for timing is because we are concerned about some of the recommendations that are coming out for capital improvements and the timing of those. We're certain that right now the Tri-Cities and West don't have a lot of debt. Seems like a right time to have that kind of conversation before you jump into a real problem that we can't resolve after we've kind of gotten there. But even if you're not willing to go here with this particular supportive House bill, we do want your support in the idea of keeping
the conversation open. I will tell you that if you haven't been to an advisory board meeting, you should try, or at least watch some of the video. For 3 small cities in that environment, it's a challenge. It's try to get your city manager from a small city like Gladstone to have a lot of influence there. You get beat up there, and it's not a healthy environment at all for agencies like Oregon City, who, yes, is the largest city and has had the most growth in the region, or at least in our Tri-City Service District. But being in that position, especially when you're getting misinformation, and I will tell you, having attended those meetings, the past director of that department really made it difficult for cities to get information. It's like being spoon-fed information to the conclusion that you knew that they wanted to get to. So I just think Oregon City has been frustrated, and we think the other partners have been frustrated as well. They're just not necessarily really willing to go to this place. They've got other irons in the fire with the county. Keep in mind how this organization is run under the county's full umbrella, and there is some inequities there. You read the agreement. I think if you read the agreement that was signed back in 2008, while I think Oregon City wasn't there at the time, wasn't part of that conversation, but as you read the agreement, it's definitely, you got to ask yourself, who was looking out for Tri-City at the time of signing that agreement? So, again, House Bill 2800, get that it's a big deal and has some implications. We think it's opened the door. We're asking for your support for that bill, but if you're not willing to give it, we ask your support to keep this conversation live and keep it open, stay objective about how Tri-City, and Gladstone's a good example of how much of that growth are the Gladstone residents willing to pay for in future plant expansions. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, gentlemen, we are here. Is there any need for any more discussion here amongst you guys? Do you want to flush through anything else? I feel like I've walked into the middle of a vicious dogfight, and yes, I would like to continue the discussion. I mean, if I have to bring Scooby snacks to calm everybody down, that'd be great. But I don't know what I don't know here, and if I'm forced to vote tonight, I'm going to vote no, because I simply don't know. And I ultimately I represent the people of Gladstone, and I look out for their interests, and I need to understand things a whole lot better before I agree to something new. So what I guess I'm hearing, at least from Oregon City's end, is there's basically 3 options. Basically, continue to bat, just don't take any action at all, don't vote on anything, don't do anything, and just let it run its course, which is an option. The other option is to vote on House Bill 2800. Are we going to be opposed to it? And another option, which I think I'm hearing from Oregon City, is basically have Pete, at our direction, write a letter to Oregon City asking them to pull back the House bill and give us a chance to start working through the process. Because this is a new city council. There is stuff we need to discuss. They got a meeting coming up on the 25th. We send representatives there. We start having more discussion. We get more education. And then if it does look like it's going down that road, and we're not coming, months down the road where we think we're getting anywhere, then we can reintroduce the bill. That's just 3 options that I see. Anybody see any other options?
No. What I can see is I have a couple of really strong reasons not to support House Bill 2800. I mean, I've mentioned them in my questioning. I don't want to go back through those again. But I also see some serious governance issues. The county wearing 2 hats when they sign a contract. And CCSD is probably getting larger than Tri-Cities is in population. One of the issues that's been brought up that kind of bothers me is now they're talking about a different form of governance, and this meeting on the 25th, and it's going to be 6 or 7 different cities. Right now we are the owner, or 1/3 owner, or whatever the proportionality is on it of Tri-Cities Service District. But this meeting on the 25th that's going to affect or possibly have effect on Tri-Cities, we're going to be one of 6 votes rather than one of 3.
Right on.
We've got, I think there was 2 or 3 different advisory committees that speak to the Board of County Commissioners, all affecting Tri-City Service District, and we're only 1/3 of one of the committees, I believe. So our vote keeps getting diluted more and more every day. Although I don't support House Bill 2800, I do want to hold the county commissioners to, in the near future, after we've got some time to get some of our other housework done, to sit down with them as well as our partners in Oregon City and our partners in West Linn, and come up with a governance that will support our ownership of the Tri-Cities as well as be good partners with CCSD, number 1. So that's kind of where I stand.
Pat, anything to add?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. Neil?
I'm with Kim. I mean, since last summer, I've been trying to get us, the 4 entities together, like I said, and disappointed that it didn't happen. But I don't like the way it's written.
You guys, anything to add?
Nothing to add.
So so if I hear you right, you don't support 2800, but you want to have the conversation with the county. You want more
not just
time.
county, but everybody.
But I mean, the county governance structure of it.
Right.
Yes.
So what's one of the 3 options? Do we want to come to a consensus on which option we're going to choose?
Or
ask Oregon City to rescind it, which gives us, then it stays on the shelf somewhere if it doesn't work out, or do you just want to pose it right now?
Well, I don't think we was never involved in the writing of it. I mean, I see no reason to ask them to rescind it. They didn't ask us to be part of it in the first place. So I just say we oppose it. If we can't have discussion with the county and can't come to an agreement on a different governance, or if we need to have a different governance, it's always on the shelf and can be pulled back out. I'm sure I'll be hanging on to my copy of it.
And I think just for the record, Oregon City did reach out to the mayor and I early January before the bill was written. So they did talk to us about putting forward a bill, and we communicated that we do have a new council and there would have to be an educational component, and we were concerned about the timeline. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
I'm opposed. If it's not clarified enough, I'm opposed to the bill myself.
So can we just have Pete draft a letter or something then? I think that would be...
Well, I was going to say
What I'd like to propose is that Pete drafts a letter that the City Council is opposed to House Bill 2800, but that we want to continue the conversation with Oregon City, with West Linn, with Providence County for further governance issues.
Okay, so that's a motion then, right? Pete draft a letter to Oregon City and all participating people that we oppose House Bill 2800.
Yes.
Okay. I got a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Maybe we already seconded it. So, Pete, do you want to do, on this one, do us a roll call on it?
Sure. Councilor Nelson?
Yes.
Councilor Mercero?
I'm opposed, yes.
Oh, I'm opposed too.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
A yes vote means you're opposed.
Okay, yes.
Councilor Johnson?
Yes.
Councilor Sickman?
Yes.
Councilor McMahon?
Yes.
Councilor Reisner?
yes.
Mayor Jacob Ellis?
Yes. All right. It is now
10:22 in the evening. This meeting is adjourned.